Oh, I thought it was. This is Boy Scout Troop 6 from Arcadia. They're going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Troop 6. And with that, we'll call to order this regular meeting of the Scottsdale Unified School District Governing Board. If we can have a roll call, beginning with Ms. Kirby. Pam Kirby.
Kim Hartman.
Barbara Perleberg.
George Jackson.
And Bonnie Sneed. All members are present. We have a quorum. The first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Does anybody have a motion?
Move to approve the agenda as submitted.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Can you check your mic?
Second. Is that working?
Did you hit the top white button? Okay.
I don't think it's working. You're just using it.
Is the green button on your mic itself also?
I've got the button pressed right here on the mic.
Right here.
There it is.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor to approve the agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is item 5, students and staff recognitions and celebrations. Dr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, and welcome everyone to our September 15th governing board meeting. A special welcome, and you'll hear public comment tonight from our student advisory board members. We have some of them here this evening, so we're glad to see you guys being here and being engaged in the district. This evening we have Dr. Melissa Sakos, who will recognize the SUSD Foundation Quest for the Best Gala winners in the field of health science and servant leadership from the district, and she's here with Mary Manross.
Madam President, members of the board, is that on?
Yes, that's working.
Well, good evening. Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Peterson and Sandra. First and foremost, thank you for attending our third annual Quest for the Best Gala hosted by the Scottsdale Unified School District Foundation this past Saturday night. As you know, we were able to not only induct 2 former SUSD individuals into the SUSD Hall of Fame, that being Congressman Schweiker and Dr. Eric Meyer, but at the same time, we were also able to honor 2 students that are currently seniors, 2 teachers in our school district, and 2 administrators who excel in the field that Congressman Schweiker and Dr. Meyer excel in, that being servant leadership and the health sciences. So with that, I am going to call up our those recognized in servant leadership as our student, our teacher, and our
Administrator? It wasn't on.
Yeah.
Or it was? Okay. All right. So here I go. For the student and servant leadership from Desert Mountain High School, Jay Klein. Come on up, Jay. For teacher in servant leadership from Coronado High School, Stacy Parker. And in servant leadership for our administrator from Sequoia Elementary School, Veronica Leeper. So as you heard me say on Saturday evening, not only do we have students who go above and beyond to excel in their field academically and being involved in extracurricular activities, not only in the school, in the community, it is just quite amazing. And with our students excel because our amazing teachers and our amazing administrators. So please join me in congratulating them as our SUSD 2015 third annual Foundation Gala winners. Honorees. All right, and on to our student, teacher, and administrator excelling in the area of health sciences. Our student from Coronado High School, Devin Strickland. Our teacher recognized for health sciences is unable to be here tonight, but that is Marcy Cameron from Saguaro High School. And our administrator in the area of health sciences, Dr. Katie Root, Laguna Elementary School. All right. Congratulations. Step outside for a photo opportunity, please.
And we would like to recognize Mayor Manross, who helped us start the foundation, and she has continued to be a great supporter, so thank you, Mayor. Next, Dr. Mitch Von Echten will recognize several of our students and adult chaperones that took the Scottsdale Sister Cities China trip this summer, and I believe Max Rumbaugh is also here.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Peterson. In fact, if I could have, I believe we have 6 of our student ambassadors with us. If we have them join me at the podium, as well as teacher Yvonne Pasek and Max and Annette Rumbaugh, that would be fantastic. Come on up. Hi, welcome. Nice. Gather around. The Scottsdale Sister Cities organization works to develop international friendships and understanding with citizens of other nations. This mission is accomplished by people-to-people interactions, which are managed by the Scottsdale Sister Cities Association. This past May, 10 SUSD students participated in the Sister Cities trip to China, acting as student ambassadors for their schools, the city of Scottsdale, and the United States. Through this process, our parents and students in China both gained personal knowledge of each other's languages, geography, civics, and cultures. And joining me tonight from Desert Mountain, we have Denitza Gonzalez. Are you up here? There you are. Also, Ashley Norman and Olivia Parker, who could not join us this evening. We're from Desert Mountain. From Saguaro, we have Abriana Thorne and Ariana Kemmer. Okay, welcome. Thank you. Arcadia High School, Emma Trainer and Samantha Maluski. Okay, fantastic. And from Coronado High School, Devin Strickland. Devin, no? Okay.
Just stepped out.
Stepped out, but here, in spirit at least. And then 2 that were unable to attend are Nancy Castaneda and Vanessa Diaz. Additionally, I want to recognize the individuals who acted as chaperones and adult leaders. That includes our teacher from Coronado, Yvonne Pasek. Thank you, welcome. And of course, Max Rumbaugh. Thank you, Max, as always. At this time, Emma Trainer of Arcadia and Devin of Strickland of Coronado will say a few words about their trip. And then additionally, Max has a short report from Ashley Norman of Desert Mountain High School, who of course couldn't be with us this evening. Thank you.
You're on.
All right. Hi, my name is Emma Trainer. I'm a junior at Arcadia High School, and this summer I went to China for 2 weeks with 9 other girls and our 3 chaperones. We started out in Hong Kong, which was a transition into China, and then we went to Haikou, which is our actual sister city, and stayed with host families for 6 days. And that was crazy. I've been taking Chinese for 5 years, and nothing could prepare me for living with a family that speaks no English at all. So we learned real fast how China is and Chinese, how to use it, when to use it, and then after that experience, we went to Beijing and did all the touristy stuff, and it was great. We saw the Great Wall, and we went to Tiananmen Square, and overall this trip has just been great. We all went in with an idea of what China was going to be like, and turns out China's nothing like what we were expecting, and that was great to start my world view in a more rounded way. And yeah, thank you for allowing us to go.
Hello again. My name is Devin Strickland, and I'm a senior at Coronado High School. As a quick backstory, I was first introduced into the Scottsdale Sister Cities when I was in Dr. Yvonne Pasek's Spanish 2 class my sophomore year. when she was persuading students that they should apply for the Marrakesh-Morocco trip in 2014. I, having never been on a plane before and never having left the western side of the United States, decided to take this opportunity. Ever since that first application and then that first interview and then the first monthly preparatory meeting, I feel that I have truly developed as a person from these trips. When I say that I have truly developed as a person, it is reasonable to assume that I did so by being immersed to different cultures, being the Moroccan culture, then the European one, and now finally the Chinese culture. But I look at it from a broader perspective. Ever since my international trip back in March of 2014, I've tried to reach other opportunities that Coronado High School and Scottsdale has offered to me. I began by auditioning for drum major at the Coronado High School marching band and then joined choir, and now I'm a section leader. And now I've started to volunteer and applied for internships and gained internships because of these international trips. I feel that I've actually cracked my introverted shell, or at the very least dented it, because I've been taking so many opportunities because of these trips, because of what they've done to me. For those of you who do not know, I'm planning on pursuing an education and a career later in the field of medicine. And though I'm not sure which branch of healthcare I would like to take, I do know that I want to travel internationally. And I feel that these trips, both the Morocco trip and then recently the Chinese trip, have really helped prepare me for that, no matter what my title may be in healthcare. We actually had an opportunity to go to a hospital in Haikou, in which we got to meet Dr. Kai. And during this trip, we got to get a little bit of an introduction into Chinese traditional medicine versus the Western medicine. And reflecting upon what I learned during the course of that day, I've summarized these two concepts to help myself understand it better when I go and become a healthcare professional. Again, no matter what that would be, but also when I was trying to speak when I came back to Coronado High School, when I was trying to reflect upon my experiences. Traditional Chinese medicine is experience-based, uses an inductive and synthetic method, is individualized, is a summary of clinical observations, uses herbs and natural agents, looks at the entire body as a whole, and is also a healing art. Western medicine, on the other hand, which is what we use, is completely different. It is evidence-based. It is based on laboratory analysis. It focuses on certain parts of the human body, whereas the other focuses on the whole. Now, in my personal opinion, I think that we should use both in the medical world. And that's why I'm really appreciate that was one experience why I'm really thankful I was able to go on this trip. It helped me gain a bigger perspective, not to develop my person, but also to develop what I believe in terms of healthcare. Lastly, I would like to stop and thank Scottsdale Sister Cities and the SUSD Foundation for the experiences that I've gained and for the help financially and allowing me and a few of the other students in going on these trips. I truly believe that these trips have benefited me in several ways. I thank you.
The trip also included 5 students who are fluent in Mandarin because of their education here, and 5 who had not been exposed to Mandarin. And at the period of time at the school there, they all 10 had to speak a little Mandarin in front of the other students. One of the students is Ashley Norman, who Mitch said is not able to come. And we arranged for her to have an opportunity to meet with a couple of professors of history that are focused upon women's rights in China. She's an IB student at Desert Mountain, and she wanted to do her IB paper on women's rights in China. And so she had to interview 2 professors in Mandarin. And here's basically, if you don't mind, a very brief summary of what she discovered is that during the early 20th century, most Chinese households had a feudal family structure in which women were submissive to their husbands. This was a traditional family structure was particularly evident throughout most of rural China. Women did not have many rights. Along with the lack of rights, women in the home had extreme poverty during the Nanjing decade, 1928 to 1937, led by the peasants selling their daughters in order to survive. Women were generally second-class citizens. This caused women to have little power to change. However, during the May 4th movement, Mao Zedong began to take an interest in women in rural China, encouraging women to organize themselves and earn rights within their homes. The most significant effort to improve women's rights was the 1950 new marriage law passed in May 1st, 1950. The law often viewed as a landmark law when it comes to rights for women in China. So you can see that we not only got exposure to Mandarin, geography, history, and so on, but they were able to get things that affect their future and their studies and so forth. And this was, she had to get this out of the study of Mandarin from the interview for Mandarin. So thank you very much for your support of the programs.
Thank you.
You. Guys, we can go get a photo right out this way. Thank you very much, Dr. Peterson.
And we would like to thank Max and the Sister Cities organization. And I just learned this week that we have a new Sister Cities partner from Kenya that the students will be coming to visit us the end of November. So we are going to be able to have an additional partnership with students from Kenya, and we're looking forward to that visit the end of November. Thank you, Max. Our final celebration this evening is regarding the Beat the Odds Institute, featuring Tanalia. Dr. McNeil will share the success of Tanalia, which has been featured in an article by the Beat the Odds Institute.
Madam President, governing board members, Dr. Peterson and Sandra, I have the privilege of celebrating Tanalia tonight, so I'm going to ask that Principal Pizzo please come to the podium while I'm celebrating her and Tanalia. Yay. Tanalia Elementary School, along with Ms. Pizzo, has been part of the Beat the Odds partnership for the last 2 years. This is due to our great partnership with Grand Canyon University. Thank you for sponsoring Coronado and Tanalia with this initiative. Upon the completion of its first year, Tanalia Elementary School earned the Bronze Award from the Beat the Odds Institute. There are 3 levels in this program, bronze, silver, and gold, and I'm expecting within the next 2 years, Tanalia to reach that gold status. Hopefully. Most recently, Ms. Pizzo and Tanalia were featured in the Beat the Odds article commending the school for their accomplishments over the past 2 years. One of the many accomplishments include meeting the needs of individual students within the school day as well as outside the school day by establishing a well-oiled academic and enrichment programming that takes care of all kids. So thank you, Ms. Pizzo, thank you, Tanalia staff, and thank you to Grand Canyon and the Center for the Future of Arizona for sponsoring this great work, and good things to come from Tanalia.
Can I have my staff stand up that are here? Stand up, because it's
The
all
Tanalia staff is here.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. The next item on the agenda is item 6, public comments. This is the portion of the SUSD Governing Board meeting when we invite the public to make comments. Although not required to do so, the Governing Board values the input of the community, so we feel it's an important part of communication with our stakeholders. As explained on the cover of the agenda, anyone wishing to address the Governing Board will fill out and submit a blue card for non-agenda matters and a white card for agenda matters. For agenda matters, please indicate your desire to speak and list the item number or topic on the white card. Public comments on agenda items will be grouped into appropriate categories. For non-agenda matters, please take note that the action taken as a result of this type of public comment will be limited to responding to any criticism made by those who have addressed the Governing Board, or directing staff to look into the matter, or asking that the matter be put on a future agenda. Pursuant to ARS 38-431.01G, no other discussion or legal action is allowed. Please keep in mind that public comments represent the personal view of the speaker and may contain incomplete or inaccurate information. If the item is an agenda item, we encourage audience members to stay and to listen to the discussion pertaining to that agenda item so that they can gain a more full understanding. Please approach the microphone when your name is called. And there are 3 limitations to public comments. There's a 3-minute speaking limit. Vice President Jackson will hold up cards indicating your time remaining. And there's another one if there's too many cards, but we don't have that tonight. And in all cases, public comment is subject to reasonable subject matter, place, and manner restrictions. Please word your comments so they are not defamatory or disrespectful in nature. The first card is Shoshana Dubrion. I think that's what it says. And Amelia Frona. And can you say your name correctly if I botched it?
Yeah, we're Shoshana Dubno and Amalia Frona.
Okay.
So, Madam President, Dr. Peterson, governing board members, and Sandra, thank you very much for having us tonight. I'm Shoshana Dubno. I'm a senior at Chaparral High School, and I'm the vice president of the SUSD Student Advisory Board. I'm here with Amalia, the secretary of the Student Advisory Board. The Student Advisory Board is comprised of members from all 5 high schools, and we serve as a voice between the district and the schools by learning about how the district operates and carrying out several projects throughout the year and working on building a foundation for them to bring them to the schools. Tonight we're here to learn more about how the governing board works, and this is really going to help us put faces with the word the district. So we're very grateful to be here, and I'll pass it over to Amalia to talk more about what specifically we do on the board.
So this year, one of SAB's main goals is to have increased student representation on the various district committees that will be meeting throughout the year. We have a lot of interest in the budget committee, so basically we just want to represent the students' voices in terms of that and other decisions that the district makes. Also, we are continuing with the Play Big project, which we kind of started last year. We made a rubric, and this year we're planning on extending that to all of the schools, as well as implementing the Bully Project, which was a program started at Arcadia that was really helpful in combating bullying and the issues of online harassment. So that's a little bit about what we're doing, and we just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's great to learn about what the district does and kind of help us understand more about our job and our responsibility as student representatives. So thank you.
Thank you very much. The next is Bonnie Bizan. Again, I apologize if I said your name
That's
wrong.
correct. Good evening, board members, Madam President, Dr. Peterson, Sandra. My name is Bonnie Bizan, and I teach general music at Kiva Elementary. I wanted to share with you some of my observations about our pre-tests and specials this year. First, let me say that I am a firm advocate for assessment. It plays such a vital role in teaching, learning, and reflection. However, I don't believe that a paper, pencil, or computer test is the most effective way to measure growth in the arts. But I do acknowledge that our district is doing its best to implement an evaluation system that's dictated by our legislature. There are 3 key issues that I believe need to be addressed regarding our testing, specifically in specials. First, student contact time in specials varies widely across the district according to the needs of different schools. One specials teacher may see their student once every 6 school days, while another specials teacher might see their students once every 3 school days. We see this disparity as being unfair in our evaluation process. The second issue is testing anxiety amongst our students and our ability to cultivate a testing environment in which each student feels successful. With changes in testing procedures, most of our tests now are given in a computer format. My observation has been that this is a positive change. However, it was mandated by our district that specials teachers were required to give their tests in a paper, pencil, bubble sheet format. Most of my 3rd grade students had never seen a bubble sheet. They skipped questions, put 2 answers on the same number line, had trouble tracking between their bubble sheet and their test booklet. They had trouble filling in the bubbles, trouble staying in the line. Some circled the bubble instead of filling it in, and a third of each class was unable to finish their test in one class period, one 45-minute class period. Many schools have the resources to test online, even with the busy spring testing schedule. Our students are comfortable testing on the computer. Please allow us to use our campus resources to test on the computer in a way that allows students to feel more comfortable and successful. The third issue is the testing length. There were 46 questions on our third grade music test. This might be appropriate for middle school and high school, but this is excessive in one sitting for a third grader. The AZ merit for third graders generally has 20 to 30 questions per section, and we think this is a good model for our specials pre and post test as well. What really made me passionate about speaking out tonight was not the inequity of the testing process. It was not about the fairness of the evaluation tool. It was the looks of confusion on the faces of my students. It was the tears. It was the insecurity, their confusion, their exasperation. Please allow us to use all of our tools in our toolbox to accommodate our students to the best of our ability. Thank you.
The next commenter is Julie Siniowski.
Good evening, board members, Madam President, Dr. Peterson, and Sandra. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you this evening. Most of you know I've taken on a new role as a member of Scottsdale Unified Schools. I now represent our Scottsdale Education Association. And as I reflected going into this new role, I asked myself, what do I represent? Not only do I represent these teachers, but I also represent a handful of missions and values that I'd like to quickly go over with you today, because that is what we as Scottsdale Education Association represent. That is quality public education for all. We believe that every child is entitled to a free, quality public education, rich or poor, black or white, gifted or disabled. All our children deserve the chance to grow, to learn, and to reach their potential. Fairness, equity, and respect for all. We believe that every person is entitled to be treated fairly and with respect. Students and school employees should be honored for their differences in culture, history, language, religion, physical condition, ethnicity, and learning styles. These differences enrich our society. Teaching as an esteemed profession, because of the power of teaching and its value to the future, to our society, and to our children. We work to enhance the esteem with which teaching is held by society. Education support professionals as valued partners. We believe every education support professional is an integral partner in all areas of the learning process and is valued within public education. Learning as a community commitment. Schools are a part of communities. They reflect communities and can change them for the better. Communities and schools must join hands to ensure that each continue to learn, grow, and progress. My overall objectives as a leader of Scottsdale Education Association is to eliminate the need for teachers to work multiple jobs in order to support themselves and their families through a much-needed pay increase. Another objective of mine is to work with district leaders in a productive and respectful manner as we build our relationship as a unified school district. Additionally, to help develop strong teacher leaders in our district, to better facilitate problem solving at each site level and build better perception of our district within our community. And lastly, did I mention compensation? Let's make this a unified goal. Make teachers whole again. Show appreciation for those teachers who have hung in there with Scottsdale Unified Schools while our wages have been frozen. I do believe our priority should be to show our value of professional educators through professional compensation. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is Todd Gosselink.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Todd Goslink. I live in the Arcadia Ingleside neighborhood immediately south of Arcadia High School. And I am here to talk a little bit about the excess land that the school district is selling. It's approximately 3.5 acres at the southeast corner of Indianola and 44th Street. And I wanted to bring it to the board's attention as well as ask the question of the district why the property is being recommended to be sold to a buyer that was the lowest bidder. On the heels of the woman that just spoke before me talking about the need for compensation and the district's financial state, I think that the taxpayers have a right to know why the district would willingly turn away from hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's all I have.
Thank you. The next person is Nate Nathan.
Board, thank you very much for having me here tonight. My name is Nate Nathan, Nathan & Associates, Inc., business 35 years. We're representing the school district on the disposition of the property just discussed. We went through a very detailed process, about 2 months to prepare for the market, sent out 867 packages, called for bids. We met with Sal DeCiccio and the neighborhood and attorneys to understand densities. We put a package together, had 14 offers, weeded out 4, asked for final and best. We brought the 4 in, dealt with architecture, dealt with personality, financial capability, and density, and the relationship to the neighborhood to the south and to the school. And it was the opinion of the group that the 2 densities on the higher prices, which his was not the highest price, was never going to be achieved because Sal DeCiccio nor the neighborhood would support the densities. So we chose the best buyer, the best architecture, a price that we know we could achieve, and we feel that we did an awesome job for the school district.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment this evening. On the next item on the agenda is item 7, superintendent's comments.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, and everyone here this evening. First of all, I'd like to start by recognizing and thanking our staff at Scottsdale Schools. As you know, the last several weeks we've had some incredible storms in the valley. We've had some incredible storms at Scottsdale Schools. And all of our staff have done a tremendous job of making sure that our schools every single morning were ready to function. We had trees down, we had water, we lost power, we lost air conditioning. We had a lot of things happen, as you can imagine, running a large school district. And our folks every single day made a difference. Our teachers were adaptable, our students were great. And I just wanted to thank and recognize everybody for the efforts they did coming together to make sure that learning continued no matter what happened outside. I'm proud to announce that we have 17 2016 National Merit semifinalists. The list of the commended students will be published later this month, but we have been notified that 17 of our students have reached the National Merit semifinalist state. Newsweek magazine recently published its 2015 America Top High School list and Beating the Odds list. We had Desert Mountain High School and Arcadia. They were 2 schools that were identified as some of the top high schools in the country. Desert Mountain was included in the America's Top High School, which lists schools based solely upon total performance, and Arcadia was included in Newsweek's Beating the Odds list, which ranks high schools based upon performance while also accounting for socioeconomic impacts. So we're very, very proud of the 2 schools in Scottsdale that made the list for the best in the nation. Regarding AZ Merit, you will hear a presentation this evening regarding AZ Merit, and we are working very, very hard to make sure that our public and our community understands AZ Merit. AZ Merit is a test that was given this past spring. The new statewide achievement test replaced the old AIMS, reading, writing, and math. Results will help us understand if our students are on track truly to be successful or if they can benefit from additional support. The Board of Education adopted AZ Merit professional levels based on what students are expected to know and is identified in the Arizona College and Career Readiness Standards. The proficiency levels are a baseline to measure progress and ensure students are prepared for college and career readiness. This is a departure from AIMS, which required minimum proficiency in math, reading, and writing to graduate high school. So you'll see that presentation this evening, and we will continue to provide more information to our families as we receive that over the next several months. I'm also pleased to announce that we had the creation of what's called the Ice Den Academy. It's a partnership between Scottsdale Online Learning and the Ice Den of Scottsdale and in Chandler. The partnership connects academically rigorous high school level courses with college-bound student athletes that are here. They come to Arizona to play hockey and to train year-round, and they are now taking courses on Scottsdale's online learning platform. So we're proud of that partnership. Arizona Mathematics Partnership was hosted this past summer at the Barrett's Honors College. We had 22 students from Scottsdale attend, 8 from ANLC, 8 from Cocopah, 6 from Desert Canyon. We had 2 teachers, Tammy Carr and Dusty Thomas, that taught at the camp, and they spent evenings in the dorms with students, and also we had Linda People, who worked as a camp coordinator. During the camp, students participated daily in math sessions and robotics sessions, and all of our students were well prepared when they came back to school. Saturday, August 29th, we had 850 middle school athletes that competed in the 5th annual Middle School Fall Sports Festival. The middle school students competed in baseball and volleyball. The festival was held at Saguaro, at Chaparral, and Cocopah Middle School. It was a great festival, and all of our athletes did a wonderful job, and we would like to thank the parents for being there to support their student athletes. Coming up on Saturday, September 26th, we have an event that will feature student performances, an art show, food trucks, and plenty of family fun. It's the SUSD Showcase. Our schools will be at the event sharing information about the programs they offer. The event will be a wonderful opportunity for the community to see the programs that their dollars are supporting. We invite all of you out on Saturday, September 26th from 10 to 2 to visit Cocopah Middle School and see every one of our schools in action as they highlight what they're doing. We'd like to recognize Kim Hartman, who received the Certificate of Orientation from the Arizona School Boards Association at their annual conference in December. We'll be receiving it in December. We'd like to say congratulations, Kim, for your work. And finally, on September 22nd, which is this next week, we have an Austrian delegation that will be visiting Desert Mountain High School. The delegation will be made up of industry and government officials, the Vice President of the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber, and the Austrian Minister of Agriculture and Environment. They will be touring the world's largest solar cooling plant. Again, the world's largest solar cooling plant, which just happens to be at Desert Mountain High School. It was built and operated by an Austrian company called Solid, and we're proud that we're able to put that technology to use and to showcase it for the rest of the world, and they'll be here next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. On the consent agenda, which is item number 8, there is a correction on page 14 of the public copy. There is a typo. The transportation bus aid under the classified departmental section should be M&O 001 funding. It's correct on our board consent agenda. Did anyone have anything from the consent agenda that they wanted to talk about? Remove. Seeing none, I'm sorry, Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to remove items J and M as in Mary.
Okay. So can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda minus items J and M? Mrs. Hartman?
So moved.
A second?
Seconded.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Perleberg. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 That motion passes 5-0. So first we will address item 8. Actually, did you want to address them together at the same time?
Yeah, I'd like to address them together. I pulled them both because my question is around the support documentation for item M, although it appears to be more of support documentation for item J, so I just pulled them at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, on the support documentation, there's a section, and this is documentation that the district submits to the school facilities board every year, just kind of for background information. But there's a projection for ADM that goes through starting in full year 16 and it goes through full year 25, broken down by pre-K 5 and then 6-8, so forth. My question is, in fiscal year 19 for pre-K 5, there's an 8.4% change in 1 year on ADM. And every other year in this 10-year projection is 1% is minimal. I mean, it's less than 1%. So if you could help me understand what's driving that 1 year spike.
Yes, thank you, Madam Madam Chairman, board members, Dr. Peterson, Sandra. These two items come together, and obviously they overlap some. To give you a little perspective on what we're working at doing is we're refining the reports to the school facility board, in that the need to begin to exclude space that is occupied by non-students, so that our matrix is more refined, and that would be item item M. So in doing that, then we were looking forward to the preschool students that are not actually counted in currently, but will be moving up to an ADM. And the ADM methodology or projections here are basically formatted so that if we ever get to the point that we would request new schools from the SFB, which would be unlikely, but if we did, we would begin to start projecting that those students who currently are preschool students now are beginning to take their place in the student body. And so we're seeing an uptrend in preschool around the district, and so that is our projection for those students who may move into the student body during that point in time.
So are you suggesting that this forecast makes an assumption that in fiscal year 19, all of preschool at one time begins to be counted in ADM?
It's not a scientific projection, but yes, it would be mostly the student body that we know now in community education and Title I and others who are not counted in the ADM preschool counts as it exists today.
They wouldn't be counted as preschool students. They'd be moving up, and they would be either kindergarten and some would be first grade. So it'd be half and full ADM. We have a bubble that now our preschools have expanded, and so we're seeing, based on the younger students that are in our preschools that we didn't have before, as they age up to those years, we see that bubble, and then it'll level off because they will maintain at that level, and that's why you're not seeing a continued increase, because that bubble goes and then it maintains.
Okay, so if that's fiscal year 19, they would be what? Are they be 3-year-olds now?
They're like
2 and 3-year-olds, and that's for an 8% increase on that base of pre-K 5. That's a huge bubble.
That's what we're seeing.
Okay, thank you. I understand now. Thank you.
So did you want to make a motion then, Mrs. Craig?
Right, yes, I move to approve items J and M on the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Motion on both of those items passes 5-0. The following items are information discussion items. So item 9A is the update on the disaster recovery plan.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This evening, Tom Clark is going to be presenting the work that he has been leading with the technology department and many of the district departments regarding our disaster recovery plan, which was something that was identified last spring during our performance audit that we needed to make sure we complete. And I can tell you that it's going along very nicely, and a lot of work has been accomplished.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. Madam President, members of the governing board, Dr. Peterson and Sandra, as requested, I am here to give you an update on the efforts that we've undertaken to develop and refine a disaster recovery plan for the district. As Dr. Peterson mentioned, part of the rationale for developing a plan was the feedback that we received as part of the Auditor General's report. And so obviously that's important, and that has encouraged us to expedite the process to develop a full disaster recovery plan. And also it is best practice for IT organizations SUSD, like many organizations, both educational or in private sector, healthcare business, you know, having your network is essential anymore to doing business. And that's no different for school districts. It's become a very vital part of what we do every day. And of course, the ultimate goal is to minimize the disruption of learning because that is our product as a school district, is student learning. So with that, we began to look at what that document should look like and how do we prepare for a potential IT disaster. Like preparing for any other kind of a disaster, it's an ongoing process. It's never complete. You have to be constantly trying to improve your state of preparedness with the goal of increasing the response time and decreasing the amount of time it takes to recover, and then based on that process mitigating the cycle for the being prepared for the next round based on what you've learned from any experiences or potential disasters you may have had. I think it's important to mention that the IT disaster recovery plan is really part of a larger process that the district is invested in currently in an overall emergency response plan. There are different parts of the organization that need to have need to have emergency response plans. Could be for reunification of a school that had to be evacuated. It could be any number of different scenarios. But if you look in the middle there, we have our own chapter in that overarching continuity of operations planning that is specific to information technology. The principal objective of the plan is to basically develop a plan that can work as a guideline for something for us to look to give us some structure to how we might respond if there was a disaster. Things always get messy if you've ever been involved in any kind of an emergency situation. It's good to have a plan, but many times it gets complicated quickly, but being able to go back to that plan is essential when you need to make decisions and you need to know who needs to make those decisions. The purpose of the plan is also to ensure that we have team members of the disaster recovery response team, and we need to make sure that they fully understand that plan. And we also need to make sure that it's practical to implement and that it's cost effective. Just as a general rule, the faster you want to be able to recover, the more money it costs, depending on, so you have to go through a process to determine what's the priority and how quickly do we need to be able to recover from that loss. We also have to cover all the essential parts in order for us to have our key business activities taking place. So I'll give you another slide here in a second that talks about who makes up the membership of the disaster recovery team. We have lots of IT people, as you might imagine, but we also have an equally important group who help us develop the business recovery process. And that is really what drives the IT portion of it. So what does the district have to become operational again, and how quickly do we need to have it? So that's something that the business side of the house, if you will, has to work with us to develop, and we're currently doing that. We also have to take it out and give it a test drive every now and then, and that could look very different depending on what we're actually testing. It could be that we're going to shut down a piece of equipment and see how long it takes us to re-implement that equipment as if we didn't have it anymore. We are going to be testing the communication process that needs to happen when we need to communicate out a disaster recovery to both the disaster recovery team members and the stakeholders within the district. We also need to review it periodically. So we have already conducted a training for our first training for the disaster recovery team members, which we did during the first half day of the fall semester. And we spent a couple hours going through a lot of the information that I'm sharing with you and helping people understand what their roles are. But basically going through and developing each of the little components of the plan that we need to have. The team is basically, as I mentioned, there are two major components to it, and that's the IT side of the team and also the business recovery team. And the superintendent and leadership team is the overarching authority, if you will, to make decisions during the disaster. But we have to have some structure in that. And so on the business side, our chief financial officer, Daniel Bryan, would be the lead person for that. And then I'm the lead person for the IT side of the operation. We also had to identify what some of the key business processes are that we need to be able to respond to. And at this point, these are the things that have bubbled to the very top of what we need to be able to have in place in order to do business, if you will, of running a school district. Obviously, you've got to have the IT infrastructure, servers, routers, switches, connectivity to the internet. All those pieces have to be in place in order for any of the other pieces to work. So that one bubbles to the very top of the list. But looking at our finance, purchasing software, student information system, email, website. Website is one of our primary communication tools to our community. And of course, our phone systems. We have about half the district, a little over half the district now functioning on an IP-based phone system. So if the network has some outages, then we have some challenges with our voice telephone system as well. We also have to look at what the risks are. And these are some typical things that you will find on disaster recovery plans. Some potential disasters, what the likely probability is for us to have that particular type of disaster, and what that impact is in terms of high and low to the district. So, if we were to totally lose the building where our data center currently resides, obviously that would be a real catastrophic loss for us, and we would have to physically find a new location to run our network out of and connect out to the outside world, that sort of thing. And even though our new and beautiful data center is on the second floor, there's still potential for that room to have some flood damage if we had a really severe storm hit that building and that type of thing. So, so we have extra equipment. We have extra equipment in place if we have a power loss. We have extra equipment in place in case we have a fire, those type of things. So basically, that kind of gives you an idea of what we're trying to deal with, or to have a plan to deal with in case one of these things were to happen. You also have to decide what's going to trigger calling the disaster plan, and that means calling all of the people who are on the disaster recovery team and asking them to respond immediately. And because of the training we're doing, all those folks are going to know exactly what their responsibilities are in that situation. But these are the kind of the things that we would basically trigger us calling a disaster recovery event. Then, we activate the plan, and everybody knows again that disaster recovery document is your guide to the process. It's not going to be able to answer all the questions or deal with all of the scenarios that you could possibly have, but again, that gives us our baseline. The disaster recovery team, they have, as I mentioned, specific responsibilities, and we have to make some decisions about, do we need to fully implement the disaster recovery plan, or is there a specific part of the disaster recovery plan that maybe is only affecting one application, for example. This is the work that we're currently doing with each of the departments in the district, and we are asking each department to help us determine what their priorities are in terms of information systems that they utilize to conduct their business. So, for example, food services has a software program that they have to have in order to run the lunch program. We have a transportation system. Building services has all kinds of systems that monitor HVAC. The list goes on and on. We have roughly 200 different applications that we currently support in the district for various things, including learning applications as well as operational applications. It is my responsibility to begin the process if we are going to declare a IT disaster. And then we have, as I mentioned, we have a communication process where if I'm not available, we have additional staff that are responsible for responding if for some reason I'm not able to. Same thing on the business side. Mr. O'Brien would be the primary contact for that part, because since he leads that portion of the disaster recovery team. And then, there are additional administrators, superintendent, assistant superintendent, who would then be the point of contact if he was not able to respond. Just a couple other considerations that we need to work on, and we are currently working on, is backup staff. As we work with the department, we need to know who the key person is for that department, and if they're not available, who is, and we also need to make sure that those people know what the role and responsibilities are should the primary contact for that department not be available. We have our legal department as part of the business response team. We have our director of purchasing, for example. So you have to bring in a whole variety of considerations, support that you might need. For example, if we had to do an emergency purchase of new hardware to replace something that was destroyed, we can't wait for a purchase requisition to go through the normal hoops to get passed. We can't even use the financial system to do it. So it might be on a scrap of paper, or it might be on a paper-based form. But we have to have a plan for how we will deal with issues like that. This is just an example of what I mentioned about how we're working with departments to kind of glean some of this information. We're also working with our chief security officer, as I mentioned, James Dorr. A lot of the information that we're gathering is also pertinent to other types of disasters. So James is excited because we're helping to reduce some of his information gathering because we're working in conjunction with him for preparing for other types of disaster. This is also something that Mr. Dorr tries to drill into people as we're conducting training. We follow the same type of a process where we are planning, organizing, equipping, training, and exercising our plan. So right now what that looks like, as I mentioned, we're meeting with other departments. We are refining that document based on feedback that we're receiving from each department. Based on that feedback, we're going to identify and develop the resources that we need in order to implement the disaster recovery plan. And we're going to schedule training on a regular basis. And then again, we're going to continue to review and refine the plan as things change down the road. And as you know, in IT, things change rather quickly sometimes. And with that, I'll take any questions or comments you might have.
And I'd just like to add, Madam President, members of the board, that although some of this seems like it may not be that important or valuable, it's crucial. And we need to understand that, because this past month, Murphy and us are best friends. It just so happened we lost a crucial part of the network during the day we needed to run payroll. Not paying 3,000 employees was not an option. So we had to scramble. The plan was in effect, and it allowed us to be able to continue to get the systems up and running again, and everyone did a great job to make that happen. Something Tom and his team did a great job on also under this plan. In the past several weeks, we had 7 straight days of having a significant attack on our system from outside hackers. And as employees knew, because you got emails saying, sorry, we're having a little bit of a delay, it was because we had a major outside hack an attack on our district network, and our folks did a great job of combating that. So this plan actually was put into effect the last month already had two major events that we were able to utilize it on. So Tom, great work.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hartman.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. And as being the wife of a CIO, I understand these monsoons, how they keep you up at night. So thank you for keeping our infrastructure up and ready.
Can't wait for the rainy season to be over, to be honest.
I know you'll sleep better, I'm sure. Just a couple of questions for you. I was interested in the, let's see here, in the IT ops, the alternate, I think it was slide 58, the alternative facility.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think what you, if I can frame your question is around how we would identify and provide alternative facilities if we were forced to use not be able to use our building that we currently have. We currently do not have an alternate facility to do that. So that is one of the things that's on the top of my list that we're currently working on. There's a number of different options. I'll give you an example. It may not look the same for every system. Our HR financial system that we use a product called Infinite Visions. And so when we moved the data center last spring, that was also a payroll week. And so basically what we did is we worked with the company. They took our backup data, which we store in a different geographic location outside of the, actually outside of the state of Arizona, in 2 different locations. They uploaded the data on their systems, and then our payroll department was able to log in on their systems with our data and run payroll basically as if they were using our system. So that would be the exception where we do have an offsite system ready to go. For a student information system, you can imagine that's pretty important to be able to take attendance and do a whole myriad of things. Right now, we would basically have to rebuild that system and find some place to host it, and it would take a little time to do that. So we've looked at a couple of possibilities. One is to identify another location in the district, maybe the MDA or maybe one of our high schools that has a little bit of space where we could basically set up a redundant room for and house some of our a mirror system, if you will, to our student information system. Maybe it runs on a much smaller scale, but it would allow us to, do the critical business functions that we would need to do for an interim period of time. That takes some coordination and planning. You have to have a separate connection to the internet, away from the building we have, and so there's also some associated costs with that. But that would be, the gold tier, if you would, for us to have that type of redundancy in place in case we needed to, because then basically it's kind of like flipping a switch. We start working out of this building over here instead of this building out of here, at least for the mission critical systems. But that is something that we currently do not have.
Okay, and that's the reason why I asked, because I assumed that was probably more than mission critical.
Yes.
So would we expect, will that be part of our capital budgeting process this year to kind of speak to that and understand the risk and cost associated with that? Okay. Second question, Dr. Peterson actually mentioned it already a little bit, but I was interested on the cybersecurity side of it and just data integrity. So we've been successful in this past week, actually have been tested in that area. I was just wondering, what kind of program do we have in place? Do we feel like it's addressing and mitigating our risk? Are there other investments that are required from your perspective?
Yes, that is a rapidly evolving area of concern for, who would have thought just a little while ago that a school district would be concerned about, that type of attack. And there's a whole different variety of attacks. We are making changes to security, some of the things that we do to secure our environment. But yes, there are additional steps that we need to do, and we are actively pursuing those. I just met actually with representative from Microsoft and reviewing how some of the major companies recently have experienced major attacks and data loss, and we want to make sure that we don't have those same type of vulnerabilities. So it's an ongoing process. It's a cat and mouse, the good guys versus the bad guys. And I'm very fortunate, as Dr. Peterson mentioned, we have some outstanding people in IT and our networking team that we're lucky to have them.
Well, that's good. And often the bad guys are better financed than the good guys. So,
Yeah, and
so thank
it's
you
not
for your
the guy
effort.
in the basement anymore. We had some of our intrusion attempts were coming from foreign countries. I'll leave out the names, but a number of foreign countries were part of a coordinated effort to breach our network.
Thank you.
Mr. Jackson.
Tom, thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to say I know this is an area so far out of my area of expertise, but this seems to be a very thorough disaster recovery plan that you and your team have put together. Certainly gives me a lot of confidence, especially the fact that you were testing it, reviewing it constantly. Looks like you're constantly working to improve upon it, which is the obvious right approach. And I just want to applaud you and your team from a layman's point of view, appears to be a very well thought out, very comprehensive, detailed plan for what is obviously critical. And I just, on a side note quickly, you were kind enough to give me a tour of the new data center this past summer, and it's hard to even compare your old facility with your new facility.
Thank you.
Very impressive. And I just would suggest my fellow board members, if you get a chance, go up there and see it. Gives
Please
you
do.
a lot of confidence.
Please do.
It's
We're very
incredibly
proud of
well
it.
thought
Yeah.
out. It's not a Taj Mahal by any means, but it's sleek, and it's an impressive facility. So nicely, on a sidebar, nicely done on putting that together. And thanks for your continued work here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you. I'm assuming this is largely on our agenda tonight because it was one of the items on the auditor's report. And having lived that audit life once upon a time, my whole feeling on this item being included in that report was kind of, yeah, okay. I mean, it's one of those items that you always say yes or no, do they have one? And 90% of the time it makes it to the report because 90% of the companies out there don't have them.
Yeah.
So, and they don't have them because you don't need them until you need them. So thank you for the efforts of pulling this together and responding to that item on the report, and for pulling obviously a very well thought out plan, given that it's been successfully tested here in recent weeks.
Thank you.
Did you? Okay. Mrs. Perleberg?
Yeah. I just wanted to round out the confidence that I think we're all feeling here. I'm with Board Member Jackson. I have trouble with my phone, so I am so grateful your team and you bring so much confidence to this world that, as Board Member Kirby stated, we don't miss it till we need it, and we don't think about it. And so thank you for the confidence that you and your team bring
Thank
to
you very much.
SUSD.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you. This was very thorough. I just remember going through a couple summers where every week there'd be an electrical outage at the district office, and it
Yeah.
seems like we've come a long way from that. And just wanted to thank so much for this
Thank you very much.
report. The next item on the agenda is budget dashboard, item B.
Thank you, Madam
90.
President, members of the board. Our CFO, Dan O'Brien, is going to present a discussion regarding the budget dashboards. We've been working on them quite a bit. So our intent now is to get some input from governing board members as to what the final dashboard should look like as we finish up that work. So Danny?
Thank you. I did learn, though, if you just tell Mr. Clark that payroll's not going to happen in a couple days and threaten to call his wife, he gets to your office really, really quickly. Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Good evening, Madam President, board members, Dr. Peterson, Sandra.
I'm going to step back just for a minute and just kind of give a little history of why we're here and what we're doing here. So if we go back to the spring during our conversations on the budget and even with a little bit of the Auditor General that we discussed, we talked a lot about budget reporting and some items and reporting to the board and what we can tell our community and stuff. So we've kind of wrapped that into what I'm calling the financial dashboard. And from that, we kind of talked about we need to do some work on it, and then in the fall, we'd come to the board, I'd come to the board, and we'd have a couple discussions to kind of work out exactly what we want to see and what we want to do. So this summer, myself, Dr. Peterson, and several other team members kind of did some investigative work, did some research, and found out a couple things. There's a lot of options. And when you talk about financial dashboards and giving information to the public, to the board, to the community, to stakeholders, that there's literally thousands upon thousands of ways of doing it in the reports that you can give. So I'm really here tonight to start that next step in showing the board what we have researched, what we have found out, and get some feedback and some discussion with members on kind of which way we want to go and how we want to look at it. Again, there's lots of ways that we can go. There's lots of things that we can produce, hopefully, but I want to kind of get that direction so we can go down the right path and get everything that everybody needs, or at least as closely as we can. So what is this? Well, in our financial dashboard, we do, currently we do a lot right now just internally. We do a lot of reports. We have a lot of items that come to me during the budget process that we meet with Dr. Peterson. But I think with that discussion last spring, one of the things that we want to start doing is telling that story, so be it to the world, to the board, to our stakeholders, to our community, and do it in a very thoughtful process. So we can build reports for the board. Another item is we can take to the budget committee. You know, the budget committee asked for a lot of data over the past several years, and that was all good to get, but it was also a lot of time consuming because we don't have maybe some of the things in place that we'll talk about tonight to be able to do it in a little bit more of an efficient way. The community, you know, the community is always looking. We get a lot of phone calls, public records requests of how'd you do this? Where's this? How's this going? How's extracurricular tax credit? How many FTE do you have? And so we can do a lot of that stuff hopefully within this process. And then obviously just budget planning, continuing to look to the future, budget forecasting, current year budget planning, and items like that. How will it be done? Well, with doing our research, as I've spoken, we do some things internally, but it is a very cumbersome process. It is very time consuming. It's a lot of work outside of our financial system because the financial system just wasn't built to do that back in the day, so it takes a lot of time. So some of the things that we found to be able to help with that is we are discussing with our current financial software Visions. They have a program that they've built. It's a good system. We're hopefully in the next couple of weeks going to demo it, which will allow us to kind of look at it and see where it is. And then outside vendors. Researched a lot of outside vendors, you know, companies who do data analysis for a living. It's what they do. Most of them have built very robust software IT stuff that, you know, Mr. Clark will probably know more about on the back end, where we can upload our data to them in some form or another, and then they can put it into a system that can help build these reports that we might want. There's a variety of them out there. There's a lot of them that do just financial. There's some that do some comparative month over month, year over year. There's a couple that do just purely budget forecasting for the future. There is a couple that work on the state level and do a lot of comparison from district to district. So there's just a lot of options out there that we can. And again, so, you know, this evening after this slideshow, just discussing with the board kind of where we want to go, maybe what we want to see. And maybe it's various directions, but just some items so that we can get out there and start working on this and seeing what we can do. Where it will be published. You know, I think the most efficient way is the website. Obviously, we talk a lot about the websites out there. People can see it. People can view it.
Some people view it, some people don't. We also can, possibly, hopefully email, bring it to the board in study sessions. We can do mailings. There's a lot of companies and government entities that do mailings. I caution mailings a little bit because they're very expensive. And it's a lot of dollars that can be spent on that when I think there's some other avenues that we can explore to kind of help mitigate that cost. So what I've got now, the next couple slides, are some charts that I kind of went through and did examples of. A lot of these companies, when we went and said, show us what you got, they said, well, tell us what you need. So what I did is I went through and built, without our data, this is not actual data, you can see there in the bottom left-hand corner, I just went out there and did some examples. So I used numbers, just examples, so that we can get some of these charts built to see what we might want to look at. So I just kind of went through and did a few. This is definitely probably not all. As I've mentioned, in some of these formats, we can get thousands upon thousands. You can run reports per school, not per school, per department. I mean, there's just thousands of reports sometimes that you can do, but I think the key is kind of the way we want it to be seen and what we want to show. So the next few slides, again, not actual data, just some examples that I put together. So one of them here, as we talk, this is M&O instruction expenses for the first quarter. So maybe there's some quarterly comparisons we can do here. This happens to be M&O instruction, salaries versus purchase services versus supplies. And again, a lot of them build in averages so that you have a data point. But then also looking at these and analyzing them. So like in this example, we look and say, wow, there's a big dip in supplies for fiscal year 13. Well, that can then be a data point for us to go back and look and determine why. Why did we do that? Did we reduce the budgets for some reason? Did they not spend? What was it there that we can, so that we can help those sites and those departments to maybe better manage their budgets going forward? Another one, and again, some of these examples are just from requests that I've gotten, so I kind of just use some of the stuff. Gift dollars. We get a lot of questions about where our gift dollars go and how much we've spent, and also particularly what school. So this example here is information that I put together for example purposes that show a comparison over several fiscal years from one school to the other on maybe how many gift dollars they've received, or even this one is spent, but we can also show revenue too. So again, just more ideas. We can, and for gift dollars, I use gift dollars just because I get asked about it a lot. We can do it for extracurricular tax credit. We can do it for food service. We can do it for rentals. We can do it for athletic fees and participation fees. There's really a lot of different areas we can do. So a lot of these charts are just, they look like just a very specific chart, but they can be expanded over the many funds that we have and the many departments that we have across the district. And then obviously one thing that we want to do is in this data is bring it together to the Auditor General's dollars in the classroom report, the annual spending report, and watching our own data and our own financial analysis during the year to make sure we're doing what's right, so that when that report comes out, we're doing the best fiscally responsible we can for that report. So again, this just shows example of how we can put it together based off the criteria of the Auditor General report, so that we can track it throughout the year, or even year over year, just in a better format of our own actual data instead of what's out on the website. And we can do it not necessarily completely in real time, but at least as repetitively as we want to ensure that we're staying in line upon the goals that we might set for ourselves. This is grant dollars. We talk a lot about grant dollars and how much funding we get from federal and state grants. So this is just put together. Again, a lot of these, sometimes these dollars are tied to certain schools or certain departments. So again, this is just another look at four example schools, that are throughout our district, and how that might compare to some of the district funding that we get, or district funding that we're spending in the grants. This one here, this one is our data. I did put something together with our data. So this one is actually our data. What I did here is I just took a look year over year, year to date expenses. So this is July and August expenses for the last 4 fiscal years. Again, just pulling our data. This is just M&O expense, and this just shows what we've done in those first 2 months, expenditures plus encumbrances. So again, you can see that we were a little bit lower in 13 and 14. We had a spike in 15.
And then obviously in fiscal year 16, and as I've always mentioned, I will celebrate anytime I can get. Obviously hiring teachers and giving raises. We had a spike in 16, thanks for our override and the people who supported that. But this is something that I just built on our data so we at least could see something of our data here. But it does show that over the first 2 months, we do encumber a lot of teacher salaries and a lot of positions out there. So although it doesn't look like a lot, but it looks like a lot of what we've tried to get in there and encumber and get spent. I put this chart in because this has actually been a perplexing chart to some of the companies that I've sent it to. This is a chart that we built based off of board input during the budget adoption and proposal and adoption sessions of looking at by operational area based off the dollars in the classroom, where the changes in budget came from. And so this is actually one that's kind of, they're like, oh, we've never been asked for that before. So it's a good challenge to put out there to these companies to see if they can really do what we want to do based off requests from board and community. So just again, you've seen this before, but just showing that we are looking at every way possible that we can communicate out the analysis that we're doing to our community and to the board. So really, again, what are our next steps? As I've mentioned back in the spring, I talked that this is probably a couple step and a couple meetings process. It's maybe not something that we can do it all in one meeting. Unless we want to be here until midnight or 1 o'clock, maybe we can get it done. But I don't know if everybody wants to be talking this. So again, what would you like to see as a board? What maybe areas would you like to see? Again, as I mentioned, a lot of those charts can be expanded all the way across the funds. I just used a couple examples. But what other areas? What reports are most important to the board? Do we want an FTE year over year? Do we want an FTE by site? Do we want revenues? Do we want just expenditures? What kind of types of reports may we want? And then again, what areas are the most important for the board? So those are just a few things that I would like some input on so that I can continue to get this so that we have it and then we can just continue to do it on a regular basis and get the information out to the community. So with that, I will seek input.
Mrs. Kirby? Thank you for asking the question. And my head's racing right now with ideas. But I'm going to try to, rather than to jump into specific detail about what specific reports, I'm going to bring it up a level and ask you to think about it in a little more categorical framework. So first off, the first question that came to my mind is what's the timing of these reports? And I can't answer that because I don't know how quickly you guys can close out a quarter, for example. And there's really two separate, in my mind, categories on these budget reports. One is just quarterly reports that shows you how you're doing against the objectives you set for yourself for that year. So for example, let's say transportation was an objective for us for this year. We ought to be seeing as a board on at least a quarterly basis, kind of year to date as well as a forecast of how are we doing in that area? Are we gaining any traction, as an example? The other category that I know that I've needed is a separate analysis solely on the upcoming budget adoption. Here's what you board are going to be asked to adopt. Here's what you're approving. Here's the analysis behind it. Here's the story behind it. So those are two separate. I love the metrics that you've included of percent to year ago, percent to 2 year ago. Those are great metrics. I would ask you to include other metrics that put whatever topic we happen to be talking about, be it transportation or gift dollars, whatever it is, into perspective. And so some of those that just quickly come to mind would be dollars per student, dollars per classroom, dollars per FTE, dollars per school, dollars per program. And that will all vary depending on what topic we're talking about. The last piece are more the categories that are on top of my mind right now that I would like for us to focus on. And I think that we ought to at least allow ourselves the opportunity to change major categories every year as we as we tackle one topic and we do really well on it, and then we put it to bed and say, okay, we're going to take on another one next year. So the categories that are big on my mind right now are transportation. In the metrics there, it might be dollars per mile and dollars per rider, for example. Turnover, dollars in the classroom, FTEs, and salaries. And the other metric, before I forget, that I would ask you to consider looking at is to compare SUSD to other public school districts in Arizona and even out of Arizona, if we can get the data, that happen to be leaders in that category, so that we can see, well, how good can we get. So I threw a lot at you. I'll make a copy of my notes and give it to you.
I'm writing fiercely, and I'll go back and watch the minutes. Thank you, Board Member Kirby.
All right.
Those are all good and I think very valid items, and thank you for sharing. I think that's what I'm looking for. I do want to mention one thing just briefly. The challenge that we have, and I guess a lot of districts have, is what you said, which I'd love to do, and it's been something that I've talked to Dr. Peterson and have talked to other business managers. There's a couple companies out there that will do district to district, and I think that's a vital piece. The concern or the challenge or opportunity to succeed that comes with that is, if they don't want to give the information out, there's no way I can do it. But I think also on that, there is some collective agreement upon some CFOs across the state that if we can collectively do it together, it's advantageous to everybody. So I think those are some discussions. I know those are some discussions that we're having right now. So we'll continue to work on those.
Mrs. Hartman.
Thank you. And thank you, Danny. You always do such a great job with the financial work. With respect to the financial dashboard, you identified kind of a number of ways that you look at it, from internal reporting, budgeting, financial reporting. The bent I took on this was more the community-faced reporting, so that's really what my comments are around. First comment, though, regarding if we go to an outside vendor, I'm happy to support any way I can in this process. I have a little bit of experience in this space. Something that just kind of raises a little bit of a flag is when you know, the conversation of when you have with the vendor, tell me what you have, tell me what you need. Most vendors at this, and I can't say most vendors, most industries, and education may be different, really do have financial templates. They should be able to actually show us what a dashboard looks like, what the drill downs look like. So I would be interested if it's just that we don't have that in the education industry, or if there are other vendors that we might want to consider. Secondly, in terms of kind of the community-facing metrics, I think the first one of a step to consider in this process is really thinking through what's the financial narrative, what's the financial story we want to share with the community, and then to frequency, do you share it, you know, on a quarterly, semi-annual, annual basis, okay? And I think there's a framework to think about. We can talk deeper, it doesn't have to be at this meeting, but I think the two narratives from a community perspective that I would be interested in seeing is understanding cost and then quality. That's the story. And so from a cost, what's our inputs? So what does that look like in terms of dollars? So there's operational dollars, you know, actual to budget comparison. That's one set of numbers that also encompasses dollars in the classroom, that narrative. Okay, and I think that's an ongoing, more of a quarterly, regular conversation. The second pieces from cost are peer comparison and investment, which I think are, because they're so difficult to get, it's really more of an annual story. But peer comparison really is, how do we compare to the state, to the nation, to our peer set, top 10 in the state, which really ties a lot to the AGO reports and things like that. That's an annual story, but I think it's part of the story that our community needs to understand. The third piece of the financial story that I think would be interesting, and this is where this probably is more us designing it as opposed to I could see a template. I'd be really interested in the community sharing investment. So what does the investment look like? We get these number of dollars from the state, okay? we get this from local and we get this from federal. This is what it looks like for us to produce A-rated district school outcomes. And so that begins to tell, from my perspective, the financial or the cost story. The quality story is really, achievement side of it, which isn't really the financial metrics, but I think you have to marry the financial story with the quality story. And that obviously is tied to student achievement, AZ merit, all those metrics that really go in measuring success. And there was one more point. But I can't remember right now. So I guess just to wrap it up, it is, I agree with you, it's a multi-step process. I think it's first understanding what the financial narrative that we want to tell as a community, and that's a conversation. Then, it's understanding who can provide it from a vendor perspective. Do we need to generate it on our own? And then what it will take, right? Because there's a cost associated with all of this to address how deep we want to go, as well as the frequency we want to give the information. Is that helpful?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Board Member Hartman, Madam President. That's all helpful, and that's why I'm here. So, that's why I'm asking. So I appreciate it. And one thing I do want to talk about is Dr. Peterson was kind of nodding over there. We have seen demos from several outside companies, and when I say that, they ask, "What are we looking for?" Because all they had to do was show us those templates, and so they showed, here's the templates. And I said, well, those are good, but I know that we have these key needs or these questions or these items. And they said, well, tell us what you need on top of those templates. So I didn't mean to say that they didn't have templates. I just think they wanted us to know, they want to know how much further that we wanted to go. And I can give an example. One of them is they do a lot of year-over-year analysis. And I said, I want month-over-month. And so, they've been working a little bit to try to get to that. So it's really, what did we want above the templates that they already have?
Did you? Go ahead. Mrs. Perleberg.
Okay. I am very grateful that we have a lot of financial expertise and business expertise on this board. And I am certainly going to defer to those board members on advice as far as this budget dashboard. So the only thing I guess I could offer up or give out as maybe a reminder is to use our principles as well in this, as far as taking a look at what does our community need, what did they need this possible dashboard to include, so that they have a tool to not only communicate with their communities, but also maybe decision-making at their campuses. I would not pretend to know what our principals might be asking, but I just would want to verify tonight that that goes out to our principals as well.
Thank you. That's a great suggestion. Thank you, Board Member Perleberg.
Do you want anything, Mr. Jackson?
I'll be brief. Thank you, Danny, as always. Great job. Boy, my board member colleagues have been so thorough. I don't have a whole lot to add other than Kim addressed something that I don't know how to marry this to the dashboard that you're discussing, but we focus so much time on we've spent so much time working on the financials and the numbers, and as we should, somehow marrying that to achievement. I don't know how that can be done in this scenario, but I think Bonnie's brought this up many times over the years, that we spend too little time. Sometimes we get so focused on the numbers we forget that we're to talk about the achievement side of it and marrying the two. If there's any way to, I'm asking you an impossible task, any way to bring that together, I would love to see that done, because that's really the ultimate. You have to spend money sometimes to get in the type of achievement that we're fortunate to have here in Scottsdale. And we need to, what I'm asking is, during this whole process, we need to make sure that is kept front and foremost, that it's the achievement that we're looking for, and we're getting it. And so anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Jackson. I think some discussion today, where's Dr. Ross? Where is he back there? And Dr. McNeil. Some discussion earlier today in LAT was exactly that, is mirroring this financial with the achievement. So I know Dr. Ross and Dr. McNeil will be wonderfully grateful to help me in doing that in the future here. So ready, guys? All right.
Oh, thank you for bringing this before the board, and giving us a lot to think about. And I just want to, I liked what Mrs. Hartman said about it being a multi-step process. And I think that we absolutely need to be cognizant of the cost. We can ask for a lot of things, and it could get very pricey very fast, because these things don't just happen. It involves a lot of labor and man hours and know-how in order to get there. So I think we need to find that balance, that delicate balance between, what does our community need to see on a regular basis immediately, and also including it in the performance dashboard. That the financial is a part of it, but actually the dashboard should be married to whatever our final goals are for our strategic plan, as far as I'm concerned, to the community. So whatever we end up coming up with this year, that we're really drilling down to focus on that, and to not let the cost of this get to the point where, we're asking for the sky, and we are a lot like teachers. We need a lot more than what we can get, so we have to always find that level of what we can accept and what we can afford. So thank you for starting this process.
Thank
I
you.
look forward to the rest of the dashboard discussion as well.
Thank you.
And with that,
Just one final item. Danny and I gave our data to several different vendors this summer, and they ran scenarios, and some of them took the data all the way down to telling us how much a screw cost in a single classroom. I mean, it was thousands and thousands of pages of data, and that's why we wanted input, because some of the stuff can be so detailed, but it's not worth it. And so we want to be cautious about that. The other thing we want to be cautious and just alert you to as we move forward is this next year, the state is going to a new funding mechanism. We are going to real-time funding, where now we are funded a year in arrears. So we're getting dollars for the students we had last year. Starting next year, we will actually get funding for the actual students we have in real time in that year. So there will be a little bit of a transition as we move to that too, and I just wanted to alert you to that as we move forward, because there'll probably be a little bit of angst. We're hearing it from some districts already, and we're preparing for it.
Mrs. Kirby?
Thank you. Just to come back to the question of internal, doing this in-house versus a vendor, I echo President Sneed's comments on the cost, and I share her concern. And then you add a layer on top of it, what Dr. Peterson just added, we're going to need to be very nimble next year. And my experience is when you're dealing with any outside third party, you lose that flexibility to be responsive that you would have if you were doing it yourself. So, and I don't think we need to go down to drill down all the way to the bottom. I think we're as a community so information starved with respect to our financials that even if we get the top layer or two, it will be a huge step in the right direction. And I don't think that would be too burdensome on our own organization to do that in-house. So I would definitely lean more to doing this in-house versus spending precious M&O dollars on an outside third-party vendor.
Mrs. Hartman, did you have your button?
Yeah, I just was so excited. I thought maybe we can get double funding there for 1 year. So I'm sure I'm wrong, but
Actually, we're losing a year funding.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Danny.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is item 9C, AZ Merit and Move on One Reading Update.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Dr. Ross and Dr. Benson are going to present this. Dr. Benson's going to introduce it. We've been working a lot with a lot of our fellow districts. I know some of you went to a East Valley School Board Consortium meeting, and there was information provided there. Several of the school districts, including Scottsdale, have been involved in this initiative to make sure that we get the information out, because the unfortunate part right now is the state has all the data and we are in the dark, and that's unfortunate, and it's something we just have to admit. Come the first week of October, we will be inundated with data, so then it'll be time for us to really put on our tennis shoes and get running. So tonight is an introduction so that the community also learns where we are in this process, because it's been quite a journey.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. Good evening, Madam President, governing board members, Dr. Peterson, Sandra, and all. Tonight, Dr. Kyle Ross, our Director of Assessment and Instructional Technology, will present the most recent information we have on AZ Merit and Move On when reading. Specifically in this presentation, you'll hear Dr. Ross clarify the cut scores for AZ Merit and for Move On when reading. He'll share how those were determined and the timelines that these results will be shared with districts and families across SUSD. Before beginning, I did want to share part of what our communication in SUSD has looked like thus far this year, situated within the timeline of state board meetings that have taken place this fall. Since the state board adopted the cut scores, Dr. Ross has shared this information with our principals, our parent council, department chairs, our lead members of our teaching and learning team, and with our assessment committee that reconvened just last week. Within this presentation, you will also learn of additional opportunities, resources, and supports we have recently made available to our principals, teachers, and parents in SUSD, including a new website launched just last week. And you'll learn next steps for communication with our stakeholders moving forward. And with that, I'll turn the podium over to Dr. Ross to share the first of many assessment updates with our board.
Thank you, Dr. Benson. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Peterson, Sandra. It's my pleasure to be here tonight to talk to you about something other than technology for a change. As Dr. Benson said, and as you can see from the slide, it's been a very busy month for Arizona school districts. It's just been a month and a day since the State Board of Education approved the cut scores for the AZ Merit assessment that the state took in the spring. And then you can see within 5 days, we were already presenting this information to all of our stakeholder groups. So this is actually the 6th or 7th time that I'm giving this presentation. A quick review of where we are and how we got here. In the spring of 2015, public school students all across Arizona in grades 3 through 11 took Arizona's measurement of educational readiness to inform teaching, or the AZ Merit exam. This is the new statewide assessment test which replaced AIMS in reading, writing, and mathematics. Some facts about the test itself: it is unique to Arizona. However, it is based on items drawn from a Utah test item bank. Arizona educators reviewed each item to determine its appropriateness for Arizona students prior to creating the test. And in the spring, the test was administered via computer or paper across the state. It was up to school districts to decide. In Scottsdale, just over half of our schools were online, 13 were on paper and pencil. So looking back at the AIMS exam, we had performance levels that were in place for a number of years, what you might remember us referring to as the FAME scale, or falls far below, approaches, meets, and exceeds. And with the new exam for AZ Merit, we adopted new performance levels: minimally proficient, partially proficient, proficient, and highly proficient. So the challenge then, new test, new assessment, new standards, was to determine what the new cut scores were going to be, that being the difference in score between those 4 levels. This past summer in July, 81 Arizona educators participated in the AZ Merit Standard Setting Workshop. This was a process by which teachers applied to be a part of this, and actually 2 of our own Scottsdale teachers were selected to be a part of this. And these 81 teachers were divided into 8 panels representing 4 grade bands for each subject: English Language Arts and Math. The process here, I'll try to explain it as briefly as I can, that they went through is called a bookmarking method. So they didn't take the test results, so they weren't handed the statewide results that students showed. They were given the test itself, and the questions were ranked in order from easiest to hardest. And then without any other information other than the performance objectives and the standards that each question was assessing, the 81 teachers ranked, they basically went through all the questions and determined the point, where is the question where a student would just barely get it or a student wouldn't get it. And that was how they determined the cut scores between minimally proficient, partially proficient, and highly proficient. Then they went through a second round where they compared their cut scores to cut scores on similar standards for assessments like the NAEP, the National Assessment for Educational Progress, and the Smarter Balanced, as well as ACT and SAT. And then they went through that round again, trying to determine where our students should score, so not where they did score. So again, they did all of this without seeing the statewide results. The recommended AZ Merit performance standards are generally comparable to performance standards for the NAEP and Smarter Balanced. And for the high school AZ Merit tests, the recommended performance standards indicate a college readiness at least as rigorous as ACT's college readiness. And this is something to keep important to keep in mind all throughout the presentation, and I'll say this several times. Our expectations on AZ Merit are higher for students than they were on AIMS. So this is something that all states are going through, and that was the process that these teachers went through. This is a quote from one of our SUSD teachers who served on one of these 83 panels, and I won't read the whole thing to you, but you see it opens with her saying that she believes the voices and expertise of Arizona educators were held in high regard during the process. And I think this is really important to keep in mind because these scores were determined by veteran Arizona teachers. They weren't determined by the state board. They weren't determined by legislators. They were determined by Arizona teachers. And in closing, she says, throughout the process, educators remained grounded in agreement that our purpose in setting cut scores is to ensure all students in Arizona are being held to appropriate standards of achievement. And again, we are raising the bar for students. We are expecting more from them than we have in the past. So from this process, there are a lot of questions that school districts had, a lot of questions governing boards have, a lot of questions that parents and community members have. And there are a number of talking points that have been developed by MCESA, the Maricopa County Education Service Agency, in conjunction with Expect More Arizona and our friend and colleague in Mesa Public Schools, Joe O'Reilly. So I'll just take you quickly through these, and these talking points have also been made available in more detail to our principals so that they can have talking points for their communities. So first of all, the test scores will be reported differently from the AIMS test. So the parent reports that are sent out next month will look different than the AIMS reports, and I'll show you what those look like in a couple of slides. The performance levels, again, were set by Arizona veteran teachers. They were not set by non-educators or anybody else. It was just Arizona teachers that participated. And perhaps one of the most important points, test scores will be lower for most students in Arizona than we've previously seen. So this means that students who for years on the AIMS test had been meeting the standard, some of them will be minimally proficient or partially proficient now because we are expecting more of them. The important thing these results tell us is not that the scores are falling, but that expectations are soaring. Last spring was the first time that we gave the AZ Merit test, so we had no baseline. These new cut scores are now becoming the new baseline for us to work toward. The use of the new tests and establishment of higher baselines is happening not only in Arizona, but in most states across the country. And all states that have already been through this process, either last year or the year before, are reporting similar things to what we have seen in Arizona when the new tests were put in place, that being a drop in test scores when they raise their expectations for the kids. So the important thing to keep in mind is that the student skills have not changed. Our expectations for them have. And finally, students and teachers will both need time to adjust to the new assessments, and parents as well. Everybody is going to have to take some time to adjust to these new things. So as a school district, it's incumbent on us to have proper communication in place for parents. So just quickly, here are a couple of things that we've already done. So we have presented this information already to Scottsdale Parent Council on August 19th, and we will continue to give updates to Parent Council as they become available to us. We posted information for parents on a new page within susd.org that presents an overview of AZ Merit and an explanation of the new standards and scoring, and I'll show you that page in just a few minutes. And then finally, the Arizona Department of Education will be sending school districts the result of the AZ Merit in October 6th to be precise. So the data that I'm going to show you in the coming slides is statewide results. We don't yet have Scottsdale's results. We will get that on the 6th, but we will get it in one big clump. We won't get the family reports ready to go to individual families. Those will come actually during our October break. So after October break is when we will get that information out to parents. So as soon as we have those additional information, we will distribute the results, and we will also determine what additional information we need to have for parents at that time. So this is a sample of what the family report guide will look like, and this does it looks similar to the Ames reports, but there are some differences. So we see a barrel graph here that is kind of similar to Ames, showing where the student comes down score-wise, but the big difference is that we have a verbal description here of the student's performance, so of the performance level. On the Ames test parent report, a parent could see strand and concept results numerically on graphs to see numerically where the students came down on the different strands and concepts. On the AZ Merit Guide, it will just be this verbal description of the performance. So that might be something that we will have to assist our parents in understanding. This is a sample of what a math report will look like. This is a grade 6 math example. And you can see that we have Maria's score is highly proficient and a brief explanation of what that is. And then here is where there is the difference. So rather than seeing on these expressions of equations, the number system, et cetera, rather than seeing numerical scores, we're just seeing a verbal description of Maria's performance. Similar, this is English Language Arts grade 9 sample parent report. And what will be important to note as we get to the next portion of the presentation for Move On When Reading is that there are 2 different reading categories that the students were assessed in: reading for information and reading for literature, along with writing and language. So with that, we can take a look at the statewide results. And again, I'll stress that these are statewide results and not SUSD's results. These are the cut scores that the 81 Arizona educators determined at their summer workshop. So again, these are the scores that are required to be placed within one of the performance levels. And again, these are just numbers unless you have some context to look at them. So percentage-wise, statewide, this is how our students performed ELA grades 3 through 11. Viewed graphically, the orange and the green are the students who are highly proficient and proficient. Similarly with math, again, statewide results, these were the cut scores. And statewide, these are how the Arizona students fit into each of those performance levels. And viewed graphically, again, the green is highly proficient and the orange is proficient. So as we get our results on October 6th and then await the parent results on October 20th, there are a number of resources that we have prepared so students and parents can start getting ready to receive those results. And the first thing that we have done, and in your presentation, these are all hot links, so you can look at them now or later as you need. The first is a link to a new testing and assessment page that we put on all of the schools' web pages. So this is our message that we've drafted for parents that explains AZ Merit and the new standards. And then you see resources for parents and community here. These are all the same links that I'm showing you on the presentation. So this is a resource page that we have developed for parents, and we will continue to add to this including any videos or presentations or anything else, any new information that we get from the state will go on to here. In addition, the Department of Education has a page specific for AZ Merit, and on the page itself there is a link for parents and students, including sample assessments and other things that parents and students will find useful, as well as other general information about the test. But this is a great resource for parents to go to directly from the state to find information about the test. Also have a link here to another source of statewide results that is clickable, so you can click around and see by the different grade levels how students across the state performed. These next two I'm not going to click because they will start automatically playing two different webinars. One of them comes from the Arizona School Boards Association, and the other is from Expect More Arizona, and both of them are informational webinars that explain what the test is and the standards and everything involved with that. And then the next great resource also comes from Expect More Arizona, and this is a resource that many of our fellow school districts across the state are recommending to parents, and it is an FAQ for parents about the assessment, and you can see it addresses a number of questions. So as of now, those are the resources that we are offering to our parents and community, but we expect this list to grow as we get our own results and as we learn more. So no pun intended, but moving on when reading. The Move On When Reading, just a quick history lesson. In 2010, Move On When Reading was enacted in Arizona, requiring third grade students to demonstrate a reading level above Falls Far Below on Ames or equivalent successor test in order to be promoted to the fourth grade. So in other words, our third grade students had to perform at a certain level before they can move on to the fourth grade. But it was actually not until 2013-14 that students were actually retained for not being at the approaches level on Ames. The problem is that now that we have a new assessment, and if you remember when I showed you the parent report on AZ Merit, there are actually two different reading categories, reading for information and reading for literature. Ames only had one. So Ames had a cut score of 379. So the state board had to determine what is the new cut score going to be so that they can determine the appropriate level that we can say that the third graders are moving on when reading. The cut score that was established was 2446, and it's important to note that unlike the AZ Merit cut scores, which were determined not based on how the students performed, but strictly based on how hard the questions were and how students should perform, the cut score of 2446 was determined based on Arizona student performance. So for this past spring's administration of AZ Merit ELA third grade, approximately 97% of grade 3 students were at 2446 or above. And that is comparable to the 2014 third grade Ames test. So that was by design that they wanted the cut score to have the similar number of kids move on last year as the year before. And that cut score was adopted and approved by the board on the 24th of August. But you'll notice there that the state board also voted to remove the Move On When Reading score from the parent report. And the reason is that it's confusing. And here's the problem with it. If we take a look back at those cut scores that were determined for AZ Merit, under grade 3 for minimally proficient, you see that's a range of 2395 to 2496. Well, 2446 would put students within the minimally proficient category. So formerly on Ames, if a student was at Falls Far Below, the lowest performance level, they were not moving on to the fourth grade. Now, under the new cut scores, a student can be minimally proficient and moving on. So they felt that that would be confusing and too confusing to explain in a parent report, so they decided to take that off the report. So parents won't be notified via the state on Move On When Reading results. Now, of course, those third graders, if there are any Scottsdale third graders who are at 2446 or below, they did move on. We didn't have the results at the end of the school year, so they are in fourth grade classrooms. So when we get our AZ Merit scores on October 6th, what we'll need to do is go through them and determine which of our students were at 2446 and below who are now in fourth grade, and we must give those identified students the same interventions and remedial strategies that they would have received had they been retained in third grade. So by this Friday, we are sending home letters to all families of students in kindergarten through fourth grade, as we do every year, explaining what Move On When Reading is, explaining the law, and everything that goes into it, and that will go to all students' families. Once we have our results in October and we identify those kids who are at 2446 and below, we will send an additional letter from Scottsdale to those families to let them know what the score was and that we will be offering those services and interventions to them. So our next steps for AZ Merit as well as Move On When Reading is that we need to have continued training and communication for staff and parents. So that's what I'm here for, is to stay on top of these things, to provide you with the most accurate and up-to-date information, to provide our staff with accurate and updated information, and everybody involved with this. So we are in communication with other Valley school districts that we have close relationships with, including Mesa Public Schools is a great friend and colleague to us. So we will continue to work with them so that we have accurate information going out to parents. Once our results are in on October 6th, we will begin our own internal analysis of the results. And we need to determine if there's any additional professional development or training based on the student results that our teachers might need. Obviously, we need to identify those students who scored at 2446 or below for Move On When Reading. We need to notify those parents and get those kids the interventions. And that when we receive the parent reports over October break on the 20th, we will need to process those reports and mail them to parents after the break. So again, just to clarify, we will get district results on October 6th as a lump sum, and the individual family reports won't come until October break. So although we will have district level results, the individual reports won't be written until after break. And then we will need to develop additional parent resources as we start to see the results come in. That is number one on our list, is we need to keep our parents in a loop as to what's going on and what we are doing for their kids. And then finally, we will continue the work of the assessment committee, which reconvened last week on the 9th. The assessment committee is made up of 29 members, 7 facilitators, and 6 observers. And of those members, 6 of them are representatives of the district level employees. 6 are representatives chosen by SAA, the Administrator Association, and 17 are selected by SEA, the Teacher Association. Also on your presentation, the green link on top, that is a hot link that will take you to the assessment committee website, which is open to the public, so you can see who the representatives are. You can also see our purpose and goals, as well as meeting agendas, and any presentations or materials that we do in that assessment committee are available to you there. So our next meeting is next week, and that is a large group meeting. We'll be working during the day, and we will mostly be working to determine request for proposal criteria for our next assessment tool. Of course, you remember in the spring, that was kind of tabled until this year by last year's assessment committee. So this year we've started much earlier in the year, and we will be tackling the request for proposals. From October through January, an RFP subcommittee will work on writing the RFP itself and putting it on the street and waiting for vendors to submit their proposals. And then we will go through an evaluation process of each of those proposals and then bring it back to the large group assessment committee on February 18th to make our final recommendation to you, the governing board, which we will bring to you on March 22nd and April 19th. So I know that was a lot of information, so I'd be happy to entertain any discussion or questions that you have.
Madam President, members of the board, there's just a couple of things I'd like to clarify. October 20th is the Tuesday after our October break. What's going to happen is the family guides that are online are both in English and Spanish. The actual family report for the student are only going to come to us in English. So our families that need it, we will have to have those quickly translated. And we have to do it ourselves. The state's not going to do that. They're only going to give them to us in English. Also, they're going to give us large packets. So we have to sort out every one of those packets by class, by student. That's going to take a few days also. So we get it October 20th. We're going to scramble to sort everything to get it to the right students at the right classes. And at the same time, we're going to have to translate those student reports for the families that need that translation because the state will not do that.
Thank you for that clarification, Dr. Peterson. Do board members have comments or questions? Mrs. Perleberg.
Thank you. Mostly questions. So if you help me understand the time frame in all of this, is there anything that coincides with parent-teacher conferences? Is there any expectation that this will come at a time where they're going to be sitting down at parent-teacher conference with this in front of them?
Yes, and I appreciate that question because I actually forgot to mention that.
Okay.
We do, when we have those talking points,
right.
We hope to have a similar document with talking points for parents available for those conferences in November.
Okay, so obviously the training, when you talk about training of teachers, that's which I assume you're focusing on is making sure they know the talking points of this assessment and on the changes.
Training on those talking points, as well as if we identify any additional training within the test results and we see, boy, our students really scored low across the board on this standard, then there might be additional training that's required there.
So the timing is good as far as those parents being able to come in with this in hand and say, okay, please explain this to me with teachers. That's at elementary school. Middle school, help remind me if we're still at a point in middle school where we only have conferences if you want them. Is that still right for middle school, or do we still really have time set? I know that's a lot more complicated at middle school, but I'm just wondering if that's the expectation is
Fall
that
conferences.
we do. So the expectation is though maybe more parents would be coming in and trying to understand that, I guess. I mean, I guess obviously for me, especially as a parent, you get so much of your information from your kids talking to their teachers and you talking to their teachers, and that's such a strong springboard to like, oh, okay, I can go to this website now, but that's the first line of
We want to make
communication.
the information available in as many formats as possible.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hartman.
Thank you, Dr. Ross. I think I'll underscore for you that the results will be because we're raising the bar for in our assessment, and not because the quality of education has declined in any way. I don't think we probably cannot say that too many times.
Correct. I agree.
So with that, kind of three sets of questions. First, I'll just kind of piggyback on Board Member Perleberg. So despite what we do, in October, the front page of the paper is going to say 60 to 70% of our kids are not proficient in the state of Arizona. And that's where the majority of our parents will get their first reaction to this. So having said that, are there other ways, just like Board Member Perleberg was speaking to, that we can just, whether I know it sounds like we've got it covered on the website, we're looking through parent-teacher conference, are there other kind of push, Facebook tweets that we can do that kind of, it's a change management issue here. It's kind of setting expectations. I'm going to say this a little bit jokingly, but can we train our high school students to go home and say, Mom, Dad, really, it's not as bad as it looks. I'm not, I think it'll take every single way we can communicate to parents. And
I think that is something that all school districts have a unified front on, is that we are all sending a consistent message to all to all of our stakeholder groups across the state, and that's something that we're all in agreement on.
Okay. Well, it's communicate on
sure.
this. Second kind of set of questions, the assessment committee. So I think you walked through the 29 members. It sounds like they're all teachers. Is that right?
17 of them are teachers, 16 are site-based administrators. Who am I forgetting?
Are there parents? That's where I was headed on this.
Great question. When the committee was established last year, some of the teachers are also parents as well, and so there was an extension out for additional parents or a student because of the RFP work that was going to be intended as of last year. It's a great question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if somehow we need to somehow reach deeper into the community on this, because the pushback is going to be, I don't want to, you know, the big risk is, well, I don't want my kids to take this assessment, or, you know, that's going to be the reaction to this, because nobody likes to deal with bad news. The way to deal with bad news is to not get bad news. So, I mean, that's, how do we deal with that? And I saw this as a vehicle to maybe deal with it as proactively as possible.
And we have parent council meeting already tomorrow. We can extend an invitation to a rep from parent council as well, but we'll also be sharing the information about where our new website is with parent council so they can blast out to multifaceted.
Yeah, I just am concerned about communication. I mean, I know the learning curve is a great tool from Scottsdale Parent Council. It actually has a 30% open rate, which is outstanding, but still, it's a 30% open rate. So I don't know how we communicate more, but any way we can reach out to the community. I think it's only going to behoove us to get that information out sooner than later, and it's really just about saying we've raised the bar. This is good news. We've raised the bar. We're facing reality. This is what our students look like, and, you know, this is why why education is a top priority in our state. So we just have to help the parents with that. Last question. It was really related to the move on when ready. So for our kiddos that are not going to be proficient, what type of funding do we have? What do we need to do to address that, and where are we in that process, and what do we do to support that?
We're looking at each other to decide who's best equipped to take that, respond to that question. We have the interventions in place for our kiddos that will be identified as needing the resources based on the move on when reading cut scores that we get. We've had those in place for years, and we have the post assessments that we have in place to, again, measure our students to see if they need the retention at the following year. So a lot of the funding that comes from that comes from our title resources, DSEG resources, and things like that that are already in place. Do you want anything else?
As well as our 21st Century Grant at the schools that have those as well can pick this up through after-school tutoring. I know that the elementary principals, we've had lots of conversations with them about making sure that as soon as we get it, we identify it and we put our framework in place. What things do we have? What do we know is successful? Because the letter that will be sent to those fourth grade families of their third graders last year that didn't meet the mark, the parents have an option to say, basically, I need you to help me, and how are you going to help me? So the school's obligation is to make sure that we give the parents what they need in order to catch their student up to speed. So the principals know this is super important, and we better make sure we have really good systems in place and personnel to make sure that we're picking up the speed.
So I'm not sure I understood the information completely, but the move on when reading, we were at a 97% success rate. So I'm assuming the resourcing or the support was for 3%. But it looks like the results are going to be more like 40-60%.
No, actually, the results will be exactly the same statewide. It'll still be 3%.
Because we're still using move on when reading.
That's how they set the cut score.
What about where the state cut scores are suggesting in ELA third grade, it's 59%, 44% minimally proficient. and 15% partially proficient. I mean, I realize there probably isn't sourcing for it, but how do we address
that's
that?
the confusion that Kyle was talking about. They backed into that score by saying this past year only 3% of the students would not have been able to move on. And so they took all the scores and said, we will only show 3%, again, will not be able to move on. So even though minimally proficient is in that 40% range, it's kind of a false misnomer, if you will, because they actually lowered that category down to just 3% band for all students across the state. So it could be less than 1% for Scottsdale schools. Remember last year we were able to retest. We had all of our students move on last year, so we felt good about that. But for us, it could be 0.5%. So that's why we have to get the data to really understand where we're at on that one.
Right, and that 97% encompasses all of highly proficient, proficient, partially proficient, and just dips into the minimally proficient.
And in reference to what Dr. Peterson just mentioned, we only had 1 year of this, and part of the law states that if we have a instrument in place that shows third grade proficiency, i.e. our third grade post-test, that can supersede to show the state that we do have proficiency. So for that first year, we had about 26 students that were not, that would have been retained, that would not have moved on in reading. We post-tested them after we got the results, and all the students were able to move on to fourth grade. And remember that there will be understandings and conditions for our English language learners, 2 years or less, as well as our special ed students. So although we may have some students that did not meet the cut score that are special ed or in the ELL program, they will be exempt from this as well. So it'll be interesting to see what the data looks like when we get it back. But I have all the confidence in our elementary schools to provide the frameworks for those students that are currently sitting in a fourth grade classroom. The good news is, moving forward to next year, they are promising us that we will get the results back before the end of the year, so we don't have kids sitting in classrooms and then trying to figure out 2 months, 3 months into the school year how we're going to fill in the gaps.
Thank you.
Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you. I have 3 questions around the same areas as Board Member Hartman. I'll just continue on this move on when reading train of thought. One thing that I would be interested in seeing once we get the results is, of the 26 third graders that we initially had and that we moved on, we successfully tested 100% of those 26 and moved them on to fourth grade. How many of them repeat 24, 46 or below in fourth grade? So they're popping up again.
Excellent point, Board Member Kirby. And the elementary principals, we've already had this discussion in our breakout. You know, where are those kids now? How are they doing? Are they currently getting resources? Were they our special ed? Were our ELLs? Were they just Joe, normal student? And what was their score? The scale score is a little bit different from third to fourth grade. It's not exactly the same, so it'll be interesting to see, but it tells the story.
Right, and if I could just make that formal request right now to bring that data back to the board. And
love it.
Yeah, just down to the school level, you know, protect FERPA, et cetera.
Right.
Moving on to the committee, the assessment committee, you know, this thought about putting parents on the assessment committee, you know, I'm kind of like, I don't know, because I don't know how much parents really truly know and understand about assessment. It is very, very much an industry, educational industry specialty. And with respect to parents who might want to jump on the opt-out bandwagon, you know, you can find a parent who wants to jump on the opt-out bandwagon and say, oh, well, we're going to load the deck and make sure we keep parents on the assessment committee that want to continue to test. I would suggest to you that it's less about the opt-out movement and more about the over-standardized testing. And it's just, this happens to be the hot topic right now. And then finally, does anyone know, between October 6th and October 20th, what level of detail of data will be available to the general public? Will it go down to the school grade, or will it just be district? Or will it be anything until October 20th to the general public?
We're anticipating district level data just on October.
Right. We have heard that the data will not be embargoed, so it's a matter of it's coming to the district, It's how the district's going to want to then release it. ADE may also, we don't know for sure, but what I've been told is the data will not be embargoed, whereas before when we got Ames data, it was embargoed where we could have it, we could look at it, we could share it with you as governing board members, but we couldn't tell the public about it. They've said this time it won't be embargoed, so as soon as we get it, however we want to release it, we could release by school. And that's what we think, it'll be by school and grade level.
Okay, so, and I'm trying to have the same anticipation concerns I think that the other board members had. So what I'm hearing you say, you don't think the ADE is going to put out anywhere on an ADE website, here's what the AZ merit scores were by school, by grade, by district?
If any indication of the past with the Ames, they never did that before. Principal works, I know that principals will, when they get their data, will start clumping groups together, grade levels, teacher data,
Ames
things
is
like
out
that.
But Ames is out there.
Not initially, when we get it the first weeks, it doesn't just show up. I think it comes later.
So you're thinking if they follow past history, it will be October 20th, after October 20th?
Easily.
Okay, all right, that's what I was trying to.
I think they'll give times to the schools and the principals to do their digging and their mining to look at, okay, here's this teacher, here's this group of kids, here's how we're doing as a site, let's look at, the things, and then as a district, we'll do our work to look at the schools and make the comparisons, and then we'll compare ourselves to the state. I think that will come later, if in history is any indication.
Well, I think that's why they use the October 20 date. It's exactly 2 weeks from October 6th. So I think they're basically telegraphing to us, you're going to have 2 weeks to go through and do things before it will be public common knowledge.
I would be surprised if it's out that soon.
But when we had the Ames process and the data was embargoed, didn't you have that time frame to scrub the data and look for any? And we report, and we could work back with them to say things aren't looking right here, but that's all gone, right?
Yeah, Board Member Kirby, that was for us to look at our reports and make appeals. Hey, this information is wrong. You got this kid here. You got this kid. This kid took the test. We didn't get the results. And remember that it's statewide data, so how one student did at one grade level affects everybody else when it comes to the old way of Ames, where they drew the line where kids ended up. So that was about appealing the information. Again, I haven't heard any information about appealing information or anything. There is no embargo, so I think the data is the data. I can guarantee you the Joe O'Reillys and the assessment directors across the state will be doing lots of questioning, lots of needs assessment, finding issues as they will arrive, and then demanding responses to those things. It should be an interesting next couple months.
'Cause my take on it is that I think most of the community is starting to wrap their minds around that this whole idea that X% of Arizona is partially or minimally proficient. They're starting to understand the bars being raised, and so I think what they're going to immediately do is say, okay, get that the bar is being raised, but how is my third grade classroom comparing to this other third grade classroom across the street or across the city, et cetera?
You bet.
And I'm just wondering, will we have not us, the board, but you guys have visibility to that data to get ahead of it before the general public has visibility to it? Okay.
You bet.
Okay.
And that's accountability at its finest, so.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Perleberg?
It's on. No. Yeah, now it is. Oh, I didn't even touch it. How about that? Okay. I definitely have some thoughts of my own regarding the assessment committee and its work. And I have to say, having spoken to a lot of stakeholders about assessment and past tools and all of that, I guess I would just like to throw out the suggestion that as the assessment committee does its work and talks about it, I can respect the idea of parents being on the committee. What I've grown to have doubts over is that fact, 2 parents have sat on the committee, actually brings confidence to other parents or the rest of parents or even to teachers that
that this is the right assessment, this is right, best for our kids. I've grown to kind of doubt that and look at it more as, just, okay, 2 parents were on the committee, therefore all parents should be fine with this. It just unfortunately doesn't seem to work that way. And so the concept, I mean, as I always heard stakeholders talk about testing, always the most important thing would be to hear your teacher say, I use this assessment to help your students' achievement grow and to guide your students' learning. That's the stamp of approval I think our assessment really needs. And as we move forward with that committee, kind of thinking in those terms of that conversation happening across K through 12, just going to throw that out there, but thank you.
And I appreciate this conversation about parents' involvement in committees because we have a pretty good handle on what committee member representation looks like for every single committee that we do. And I wasn't involved in the actual beginning part of this committee, so I need to get clarity on whether or not the reason that may have not happened, did maybe parents not respond to want to be on it for exactly the reasons that have been indicated here. I'd rather defer that to educators because we have had parents do that on certain curriculum adoptions, saying secondary math. I remember we had 2 parents initially indicate their interest and then showed up the first time and said, love you guys, go to work, total trust you to do this. And so that may have already happened here, and I need to get clarity on that. And the other piece to this, our entire purpose for this committee is really to learn about assessment, pay attention to how our teachers, what their needs are, what our site level needs are, what our district level needs are, and to write this RFP. And that is heavy hitting work on the part of the educators around that table. So I will get clarity on what the initial request might have been. I don't have that right now, and get back to you about committee member makeup specific to RFP work, because that might be a little bit different than general committee work.
And that's the excitement part of RFP work as well, is that we have the opportunity to say, you know what, these are the 50 or 100 things that we want in an assessment tool, and then let the vendors come tell us whether they can do those things for us or not. So it's difficult work, but it's exciting work. We have a good opportunity.
Thanks very much, Kyle. One of the things that those of us that went to the East Valley School Board Consortium saw was a slide that I think almost everybody could relate to. It showed a sample Ames question with the 4 multiple choice, and they explained this kid has a 25% chance of getting it right, whether they know the answer or not. This is what an AZ merit question, a similar question, looks like. Not only do they, in most cases, have to know the right answer, they have to show how they came up with it.
Sure.
So I think that's something that everybody can relate to, because I'm sure everybody at some point in time said, okay, out of these 4 questions, I know it isn't this one or this one, I got a 50% chance.
And one of the things my friend Dr. Dodds likes to remind us of is the AZ merit-like test questions. Those are not new skills to our students. Those are activities we've been doing with our kids all along. It's just that they weren't tested that way on a high-stakes test before.
Right.
So that's the difference is the format of the test.
I thought that was an important piece of explaining to people who have not followed through it. I have to tell you, and sitting through the initial presentation at the East Valley School Board Consortium that we saw, I was so grateful for all of the background information, especially that Dr. McNeil has given us over the years. This is not unlike the same thing that you warned us about between Ames and if we had gone to Park. It's the same kind of thing. And so over the past couple of years, I've been able to follow some of the other states when this first happened and some of the reactions that happened. And New York was hit pretty hard. And what we learned also is that Kentucky did a better job of communicating to people up front, getting people to understand this is good for our kids. It's not apples to apples. And so I think one of the things that I'm really enjoying out of this is seeing the different school districts work together, because we've been kind of pitted against each other for a number of years to compete. And these are the kind of things that sometimes hardship brings you all together. So we're all in the same boat. And I'm really excited to see, this is just a comment, that they involved the experienced Arizona teachers. Wow, what a concept. In determining the cut scores rather than the kind of, I couldn't even tell you what process was used with Ames. It was one thing one year, one thing another year. It seemed like it was more of a PR play than it was something that you could really count on. So whether the scores are something we like to see when they first come out or not, they're real data. They're not just a PR play. So thank you for your
I appreciate, we just want to clarify, I appreciate the encouragement to reinstate the kinds of questions that person saw on Ames versus what they saw on AZ Merit, because we did a lot of that work last year, but we've kind of let that go. And so to revisit that as we share this presentation is good feedback, because we work with our teachers and parents to share practice tests, differences in what the questions are going to look like. But that's good feedback to bring that back into this again. Remember that Ames look like this, the assessment question looks like this on AZ Merit.
And if
Good
you look
feedback.
at that, the link you have to the Department of Ed AZ Merit page, it does have sample test items on there, and I encourage you to click around and take a look at a couple of the tests, and you'd be surprised what types of things they're asking kids to do. It's really cool.
And in my mind, I was thinking even more, not necessarily the teachers or the parents, but everyone else, the rest of the community that we ask to support us and to support our teachers every day. So, Mrs. Hartman, your button's on.
Thanks. One more question. First, I apologize. I don't think I said thank you for all the work that's gone into this to date. Really, it's been a tremendous amount of work and communication, so I really appreciate it. My question for you, related to the assessment committee, once again, it's just more on the AZ Merit informed teaching, the IT part of this. I am wondering in the RF, as we have our professionals together building the RFP for the assessment tool, would it be reasonable for those professionals also, or educators, to identify what kind of resourcing or professional development we need as a district, whether it's site leadership or it's our educators, to analyze, understand, interpret the results so that it can become, our tools can become a more meaningful teaching tool. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, with that, I'm going to ask for a 5-minute recess, and then we'll come back and finish the next item. Thank you. like to get back to business here? So the next item on the agenda is item 9D, SUSD analysis of student participation and performance.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This presentation is an interesting one. It's something we've been talking about quite a while about achievement gaps and student achievement and performance. And we've really been looking hard into the data. And this is some initial discussions that we want to have, but we will continue to bring these discussions back to the governing board to talk about where our students are. And we're looking at students all over the board, from students that are lower performing to our middle range, and then our higher achieving students and what we can do to make sure we support them also. So tonight is an initial set of conversations of data points. There's a lot of data here, and I think Karen and Mitch and Dave have done a good job of putting all this into context.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. Good evening again, Madam President, governing board members, Dr. Peterson, Sandra, and all. Before beginning, Dr. Peterson asked me to quickly clarify something in the event persons were watching our previous presentation, in that the investment in time and energy of our teachers to create questions, because we have been on that quest for 3 or 4 years, we've been really purposeful, knowing that we'd have the potential transition of a vendor, and we didn't want to be locked into one vendor, so we have retained all of those questions. We have them in our own Excel banks, all of them. So that's a really, really huge point for persons to make, so that persons would know moving forward, regardless of what happens, that data and the work of our teachers would not be lost. So I want to make that point before moving forward. Yes. Okay, transitioning to this presentation. As many persons are aware, we are currently engaged in this work to make slight revisions and updates to our 2011 SUSD strategic plan. As we do so, 2 of the questions we are posing to a variety of stakeholders include: what important criteria do we need to use to make future decisions? And what does our next level of excellence look like in SUSD? In response to those questions so far, our principals, teachers that we've seen at site visits, and members of our teaching and learning teams have shared consistent themes, situating that all kids can learn as most significant as a guiding principle, and that high expectations for all kids is the key to success for all of our students. Those responses reflect our key vision in SUSD, and that we strive to provide enriching experiences for all students to support their development as well-rounded persons and impact their lifelong educational and career aspirations every day in every classroom across SUSD. We've come before you to acknowledge the work of departments and sites in providing opportunities for all kids many times. And to get us started this evening, we've included the most recent well-crafted brochure, hot off the press as of last Friday, designed by our Christine Harrington and our communications department, as evidence of some of the outstanding learning opportunities happening across SUSD schools for our students. Dr. Peterson, do you have that, and did you want to pass it out? Okay, it's really good, so I'm going to make like a teacher and ask you to put it aside for a minute, because we could all get engaged in this, because she's done a fantastic job with her department. So that's your after reading, and I apologize it wasn't sent before, but wanted to embed time this evening, and she just finished it on Friday. But as we transition, leading experts continue to challenge that all schools, public or otherwise, can do better to identify, support, and promote opportunities for underrepresented students as identified by national, state, and local measures of data and experiences. So, for the purpose of this presentation this evening, we're digging deeper into our data, looking through multiple lenses and perspectives in order to seek a better understanding of our student participation in high school AP, IB classes, and student performance, specific to PSAT, SAT, ACT, and AP exams, our graduation rate, and given we don't have our district AZ merit scores just yet, we've used previous AIM scores for a data set for this evening's conversation. In keeping with the recommendations from our BRAC committee that you heard last spring, specific to our diversity and inclusion plan, our goal in digging deeper into our data is to find opportunity and achievement gaps involving our underrepresented students, and identify purposeful ways to increase their participation in academic performance in SUSD. Before we begin, you may have heard that Drs. McNeil and Von Echten are inviting speakers to our principal meetings this year, affording our leaders with opportunities to learn more about the context and complexity of what it means to teach and lead and learn in public education today. So far, Dr. Berliner and Dr. Garcia have been featured guests this year, and they have reminded us to consider all factors that impact learning when we disaggregate data. They encourage educators to look through various lenses to better understand our students and the in-school and out-of-school factors that shape their learning. This allows us to be most respectful in supporting and responding to the needs of all of our students. Important to this conversation is this. Leading experts tell us that if we only examine data on overall average rates of participation and performance in coursework and programs, that can mask important differences in the availability of educational opportunities for our students. Thus, for the next part of this presentation, Drs. Von Nechten and McNeil will share national, regional, state, district, and site level data disaggregated by a variety of subgroups. At the end of this presentation, I'll situate some of that data presented this evening as compared to national statistics, share our intended next steps for this starter conversation, and identify some of the key steps we're already doing to support our underrepresented students this fall. And with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Dr. Von Nechten.
Thank you very much, Dr. Benson. Oh, there is our new brochure. I'll click through for you. Madam President, Governing Board members, Dr. Peterson, I have an abundance of secondary data, specifically high school data, to present to you tonight. The first slide, I wanted to just start big picture, and you'll note that this really doesn't reference specific SUSD data. What you have here is this is data from last year's PSAT taken by our juniors. And again, for context, the PSAT is taken by our juniors for national merit qualifying. As Dr. Peterson mentioned, we right now have 17 semifinalists going into this year. We also administer the PSAT as a practice to all of our sophomores in the school year. The reason I reference this is we can utilize that data for various abilities to help students and place students in appropriate courses. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but we can use this data, and Dr. Benson will mention this at the end in terms of identifying students for honors and AP potential. So with that said, though, we can drill down a little more specifically to the SAT itself. Now, the SAT is taken by juniors and seniors for college application and acceptance. And with this specific graph here, what we have here then is looking at the example to the left, the bar graphs. This is for the district in the areas of critical reading, mathematics, and writing. And this is a comparison then of Scottsdale Unified School District with just under 1,200 students that took the SAT last year in comparison to Arizona and the nation. And then we drilled that down even a little deeper with the SAT by site and by ethnicity. So this chart is a little busy, but for instance, here at Arcadia, we have then those same areas of critical reading, mathematics, and writing for all of the students that took that SAT at Arcadia. And then we have a comparison across the different ethnicities at Arcadia High School. Now, we've done that same data set for all of our high schools, and I'll just slowly go through these slides, but we next have then Chaparral, Coronado, Desert Mountain, and Saguaro. So similarly, we have the ACT test, which is again taken for college application and acceptance. There's broader measures within the ACT, including English, mathematics, reading, science, and a composite score. This again compares our district and the students that took that compared to Arizona and the nation. And then again, we drilled down specifically looking at the ACT by school, and in this again by ethnicity, with the number of students that took it and the average score in English. And then we have a comparison across the different ethnicities at Arcadia High School. And likewise, we have that again for each of the 5 high schools: Chaparral, Coronado, Desert Mountain, and Saguaro High School. So this one's a little busy, but what we have here is a look at our total high school enrollment, brick and mortar, for the 5 high schools. Across the top, this is longitudinally going back several years. This does not include Seoul. It includes our 5 brick and mortar high schools only. And then going back, what we have is total AP enrollments. Keep in mind, this is not student, but course enrollments. Students often sign up for multiple AP courses in a given year. And then we have the number of tests taken. And again, this is not the number of students that tested, but the number of actual tests taken. And you can put that and look at that in regard then to what our total enrollment looked like that year. And if you look at trend lines, what we have seen is increasingly we have more students enrolled in courses, and we also have had over the last several years more tests taken by our students, even at a time when enrollment has been declining in our brick and mortar schools. Again, this does not include Seoul, which has actually increased enrollment over the years, but has a rather minimal AP impact in terms of number of students taking and testing within Seoul, so I excluded them. The other piece of data that we have here then is tracking dual enrollments for the last 4 years. Going again, we often have students that take multiple dual enrollments, so these are course enrollments. And again, if you look, you've got nearly a 25% increase over the last 4 years in terms of the number of courses taken. So then we drilled this down a little bit based upon enrollment in AP to see what that might tell us. So again, what we have here then is, this is a district summary broken down by ethnicity on the left. We then have the corresponding percentage of our students within each of those ethnicities. Percentage breakdown. We then did the same thing for our AP enrollment. And so then we have the number of students from that particular ethnicity and how that compares in terms of the percentage of enrollment within AP courses. So what one can do is to look at terms of the reflection of our AP enrollment to that of our total enrollment and look for disparities or where they're similar. So using that same information, did the same thing in regards to gender. And so we have a breakdown of our male-female population across the district and what that looks like in terms of AP enrollment across the 5 schools in our district, 5 high schools. We did the same for free and reduced lunch in terms of the percentage of students across our district in the high schools and those that are participating in our AP program. So then we took each of those and again broke it down by each of the schools. So in this case, this is again total enrollment breakdown ethnicity percentage-wise at Arcadia, and then what that looks like in reference to their AP enrollment. And again, I have this for each of the 5 schools, so I will just slowly go through these slides. We next have, we also have then the gender breakdown at Arcadia total and what that is reflected into our AP enrollment. And again, free and reduced, total at Arcadia, and then across, within the AP enrollment. Here's Chaparral. Chaparral by gender and free and reduced. Coronado by ethnicity. And then Coronado as gender and free and reduced. Desert Mountain gets a little busy in that not only do we have percentage breakdown by ethnicity for the whole school, but then now we add a column for IB enrollment and then again for AP enrollment. So we actually have 3 columns that we could make a comparison to. This is ethnicity, and then again this is gender and free and reduced. And then we have SWORO based upon ethnicity, gender, and free and reduced. This slide goes back for the last 6 years in terms of graduation rates for a 5-year cohort. So again, this is a 5-year graduation rate. Essentially, you take that 4-year cohort, extend it by 1 more additional year for 5th-year seniors, and they compute the graduation rate based upon then that 5-year number. This has it broken down by school in terms of trends over the last 6 years, and then again, the trend for the 5-year graduation rate for the district-wide over the last 6 years. And at this point, I will turn it over to Dr. McNeil.
As mentioned earlier, we're using the Ames data due to not having the AZ merit information readily available, but I can assure you that once the AZ merit information is available to us, it'll be part of the conversation, as I'm sure you assumed. All right, let's look at the Ames reading at grade 4. We selected grade 4 to tell this part of the story because at grade 4, we have reading, math, and science. So other grade levels don't have the science, but we wanted to have as many indicators as possible. So you will see the grades that take the science Ames test, which we're continuing as well. So that would be the motivation behind it. Looking at the graph, we have our subgroups along the bottom that are identified within taking the Ames test, and then we have the two categories of free and reduce in blue and non-free and reduce in, I don't know if that's mustard or orange. You choose. At the bottom of the bars, you can see a numerical value, which represents the number of the students that percentage is representing. So 23 would be 74% of roughly, I don't know, 32 kids. So that would show that. So again, our subgroups along the bottom of ethnicities and our free and reduce in grade 4 reading, district-wide. For 4th grade mathematics, again, same subgroups of ethnicity and our two categories of free and reduce, as well as non-free and reduced. And science, grade 4, same categories and subgroups. We'll move on to the 8th grade. Again, showing the differences between the free and reduce and the non-free and reduced at each ethnic category. Eighth grade math. And 8th grade science. At first blush, as Dr. Benson and Dr. Von Eck and I looked at it, it's always important to look at the total, the size of the number at the bottom when comparing the ethnic subgroups. Obviously, when you have 1 or 2, a little different story being told than 102 or 108. Grade 9 was a Stanford 10 tested grade level and currently a Science Ames tested grade. Again, same ethnic categories, free and reduce versus non-free and reduce. 10th grade reading, district-wide. 10th grade math. And 10th grade science.
Thank you, Dr. McNeil. While we've shared a lot of data tonight specific to where some of our underrepresented students are participating and how they're performing on a variety of important measures, this presentation tonight is just a starter conversation on the work that needs to happen to fully identify opportunity and achievement gaps with respect to our underrepresented students. Our next steps involve continuing to share this data with our principals and our departments to allow them to pose the detailed questions to make sense of this data. We believe the analysis and conversations at the site and department level to be most important as we collectively strive to promote equitable opportunities for student participation and achievement in SUSD. For the purposes of this presentation, we are referencing 4 national data points to use to situate some of the most significant takeaways from the data that we presented this evening. First, we know that nationally, students who take college prep courses and pass them are disproportionately affluent, white, or Asian. Our SUSD data shared this evening reflects this national statistic in participation by subgroup. But we also know that our aggregate results in SUSD show that we outperform national stats specific to pass rates, and that our overall average school level AP exam rate in Scottsdale is about 60%, 3% points higher than the national pass rate of 57%, and 4% points higher than Arizona's pass rate. So our next steps include digging deeper into our pass rates by subgroup in SUSD. An additional important next step for us is looking at our students' participation in other college credit-bearing courses available as dual enrollment based on our subgroups. Because we know for some of our students, dual enrollment coursework may be more in line with their post-high school goals than is AP coursework. And that's significant to this conversation as well. Second, we know that nationally, AP Calculus, BC, AP Physics, Chemistry, and Biology all have around a 70% male majority, while AP English has a 70% female majority. And we know that over the last decade, other national studies reveal that in public schools offering AP programs, females are more likely than males to participate in the program. As you have noted, that's consistent with our results as well, as according to our SUSD data, our females are slightly disproportionately higher in participation in both AP and IB classes. While this is an important baseline, our next steps to understand this better include looking into which AP courses our males and females are taking, and again, factoring in what other dual enrollment college credit-bearing courses our young men and women are taking as well. We need to understand both before we can understand the composite picture of the college credit-bearing courses our students are pursuing in SUSD. Third, nationally, we know there's a million statistics we could share, but there's ample evidence that poverty is a strong factor in shaping our students' lives. That's a point our Dr. Berliner maintains is key to understanding student learning. In fact, Berliner goes a lot further, indicating that about 60% of the variance in school performance is more likely the result of out-of-school factors, not inside-of-school factors. Though principal, teacher, and school influence are very significant, and we have evidence of that significance in SUSD, Dr. Berliner shares that roughly 20% of the variance in performance as measured by test scores can be accounted for by in-school variables. These statistics are pretty significant, and in our initial analysis of data, it reflects this, in that for some of our students, socioeconomic status may be more of a factor in students' performance on tests in some areas than ethnicity or gender. Thus, great teaching on the part of our teachers, combined with the programs our schools and departments lead to extend learning and provide services for students and families outside the school day, are both imperative to ensure our students' success. Our Back to School Backpack program that you've seen previously this year, supported by our communications department and our community specialists, DSEG and Title I departments, is just one example of one significant way we're working to combat the inequities across the district, specific to poverty amongst our students. And finally, as a last big picture statistic this evening, we know that nationally, exposure to work experience in high schools has been linked to decreased dropout rates. However, teens with higher annual family incomes are more likely to engage in summer employment opportunities. This statistic may seem a bit unusual to include in our initial analysis this evening, but the opportunities our schools and departments are creating now to allow our students to participate in internships, mentoring, or real-life work experiences towards a certification process are critically important to promote college and career readiness and ensure our students graduate. Our key next steps include that we will continue to share this data with our principals, members of our teaching and learning team, and our counselors, providing opportunities for persons to further analyze, pose questions, and really make sense of the data specific to their site. Fostering the skills to better understand and deconstruct multiple data sources using a variety of lenses is important, and this step is going to involve sharing participation and performance data of additional subgroups you didn't see included in our first cut of the data tonight, including our ELL students, students receiving special ed services, and our students identified and gifted as they progress through high school. And a third next step includes, as you've heard this evening, an analysis of our AZ merit data when that is released in October. That will allow us to identify additional areas we can nurture development and promote improvements in academic performance for all of our students. In response to this data and the conversations we've been having, some of the steps we are already initiating and will continue this year include being purposeful in identifying underrepresented students and increasing participation in AP/IB honors by the following steps: encouraging our counselors to continue to review information in Naviance with students to learn more about their goals and aspirations and identify coursework that will best prepare them for those opportunities. As Dr. Von Echten mentioned earlier, again, reviewing PSAT AP potential information is important to identify our students that may be interested in and successful in AP college level courses and exams. We'll continue to promote open access to honors and AP coursework at the middle and high school levels. Some of you may remember we made a big effort to remove barriers and allow more students access to honors and AP coursework 4 years ago when we added a commitment letter that explained the benefits of participation in honors and AP and IB level coursework in our registration practices with all of our high schools. And we now use those same or a similar commitment letter to promote participation in middle level honors and English language arts as well. Fourth on our list involves promoting participation in programs designed to prepare students for success in college and career, like AVID, or Junior ACE, which stands for Achieving College Education. And that's a brand new partnership we're pursuing with SCC this year, intended to provide support to our Native American students at the middle school level. Additionally, Dr. Dodds is leading the charge to revise and consider altering our identification practices to ensure we're identifying students in underrepresented subgroups in our gifted services and programs. Further, we're providing additional opportunities led by Jessie Kinney for parents of underserved populations to learn more about resources available to students and parents, and provide another avenue for parents to pose questions about how to successfully do school and advocate for their children. And finally, supporting the great work that's being led by Alyssa Tarkington at Coronado with respect to their early college and career focus, especially as that now includes offering opportunities for students to earn credits towards certifications while they're at Coronado moving forward. Additional steps to promote academic achievement for all of our students this year include that we're continuing to analyze our support resources and models that we already have in place to determine their effectiveness. This includes reviewing resources we currently are using for interventions. We'll continue to provide professional development on the instructional shifts to promote the kind of thinking expected of our students at each level on AZ merit within the Arizona College and Career Readiness Standards. We'll provide professional development on mindset, on the importance of mindset on student performance. Our department chairs have especially appreciated this lens that we started last year, and that involves the conversations about how can we support and empower our students to develop resilience and grit and the skills to self-advocate for themselves. We'll provide additional professional development on the needs identified by our principals and teachers as they work through their school improvement and North Central accreditation processes this fall, and providing teachers with opportunities to learn more about culturally responsive teaching in keeping with our SUSD diversity and inclusion plan, the recommendations from the BRAC committee that we heard about last June. From the work that committee had done for the previous 2 years. And with that, we'd like to entertain your questions and thank our friends in CIMAR and our assessment departments for helping us to put together this first blush data that we presented for you this evening.
Board member questions or comments? Mr. Jackson.
Dr. Benson, thank you very much for this presentation. I'll be very brief. I know this has been an ongoing effort. I just think, I don't know what to say, I think this is wonderful that we are making such an effort to drill down as best we can and get these kids into these, to try honors and IB and AP courses. I just think it's a wonderful effort. I applaud everything you're doing. This is what public education, in my opinion, good public education is all about. And so anyway, thank you very much for all this effort, and this is great stuff. Thank you.
It's a good start. Thank you.
Mrs. Perleberg.
All right. Thank you very much. This is obviously a huge topic. These are trends that, I think we all know public education has looked at these trends for decades, and they are what they are, and our wonderful education professionals work so hard to identify them and improve some of the more difficult statistics that we have, especially in public education. And I agree that that is what is one of the wonderful things about public education. I hate I hate to dig into because it is such a huge topic. I know so much work goes into it, and I hate to kind of dig in and sound critical because I'm not. And I'm not discrediting all the work that is done. When I look at the next steps and the work that we've started, everything's great. What strikes me, however, especially living in South Scottsdale and having the majority of the elementary schools with high rates of free and reduced lunch populations, and just dealing with a lot of some of these statistics that we're reviewing tonight. When I look at those steps, I see a lot of focus on high school, and I can't help having that sense of, I hate to say too little too late, but I mean, that sense of it always goes back to, as our teachers repeatedly tell us, it goes back to elementary school. What are they entering high school and middle school with? So I guess as far as pushing forward or growing on top of this, I'd love to see those specific steps that we want to incorporate in our elementary schools that have higher populations of, free and reduced lunch, and that are just affected more by some of these factors that we know challenge our students. And so, I said I love the Early Support College Coronado, but it's like we got to go down, obviously, there and start the focus. I know that's nothing new. I know this isn't a, hey, aha moment. I'm sure there. It's just I'd love to in the future see that in a lot more detail. I mean, the gifted program's great, but if I recall correctly, that's 3% of our population. So it's the rest too. So I'll just throw that out there.
Madam President and Board Member Perlberg, that's a great observation. It's really difficult to capture on a slide what the next steps might look like. Any one of those departments we could bring back and do a full presentation on what one of our teaching and learning departments is doing to respond. And you're right, Dr. McNeil is going to talk to you, I think, about school improvement plans and where that's going, or what that will tell us to allow us to shape our next steps as well. But to be more purposeful and thoughtful about how we intend to support our elementary schools, I think is great feedback and coaching, and we can include more moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. I'm excited to see the products from the school improvement process that we're going through this year. Lots of conversations amongst the principals. Obviously, our FLY program at Pueblo, our arts integration at ANLC, our STEAM Academy at Navajo. They have an identity. They know where they're going. They know how they're going to get things done. So there's lots of conversations amongst the other schools, if you will, about what are we doing to make sure that we're taking care of all kids, and are we doing right by our community. So it'll be exciting to see what they have for us, who they are, and where they want to be. Can't wait.
Thank you so much for the presentation and all the hard work out there in SUSD.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hartman.
Thank you. First of all, wow, this is just an amazing, thank you for all of the time and focus and attention that went into actually pulling this information together. It's really outstanding work, and it really, I think, reflects the great work that's happening each and every day in SUSD. One, maybe two questions. What I was wondering, and I realize this is part of an iterative process, would it make sense to actually look at the data? So if we're looking at by grade and by subject, and then look at it across sites. So ethnicity across state sites, free and reduced side by side with sites, male, female sites, so that you begin to see, is it the site that has, it puts all factors similar, but then compares it to the sites to see if there's some best practices or if there's some dynamics that actually can be shared across the sites. And I see, I'm assuming the answer is yes, because 3 people stood up. So I can't wait to hear. And then one other question I have, and this is splitting hairs because we're already doing just outstanding work, but I did notice that our graduation rate was declining, and just kind of wondering what the story is behind that.
Okay, on the first question, I shared a draft of this presentation with the high school principals at a breakout and a summary with the middle school. But our high school principals, in the context of them preparing their own school profiles and their site improvement plans, found the data just absolutely overwhelming and amazing, and wanted it immediately. This is the kind of data we're craving, and that was the conversation, because you're right, it is. When you break that down, it is unique to each school, and how they're addressing those areas or things they have done or things they may have missed in the past kind of really came to light when we had a conversation among the 6 of us about what just does this mean. So we can look at organizing this and providing it. They've had it now for some time, and I've continued to kind of disaggregate and provide it in ways I think that might be a little more user-friendly and meaningful to them at their own site. Regarding our the 5-year dropout rate, I'm also trying to get some additional data to that. One, how do we compare in terms of a trend line against the state? We always have a much better dropout rate than the state as a whole, but how does that trend compare? And also, I'd like to look at some of our neighboring districts that mirror us in terms of what we look like and what their trend has been, because maybe there's some pieces out there that are more unique statewide. I think there's a variety of things that we could look at that might speak to that at the high school level. I think that over the years, as we have transitioned to e-learning and students are now taking courses in that format, how are they doing? And I've had some conversations with Dr. Thuman there. Do they frustrate? Are they not completing? That's some data we can look at. I think also over the years, having a credit recovery program that was not located on each site, but using STEP. And although STEP was invaluable and helped a lot of kids, I think for some students that had to travel, although they were a student of record at Saguaro perhaps, but traveled here frustrated, and maybe we lost them. So I think that when we look at that, there's a number of variables that have impacted that I think we need to drill down and look at.
Okay, thank you. And can I ask a follow-up question? This might be kind of one of those kind of crazy ideas, but related to graduation rate, and I realize, is it possible to go after 100%? And I'll tell you why I'm sharing this. I realize it can't be 100%, but I actually read this interesting article in Tucson, within somewhere in Tucson, smaller, I don't know if it was a district or a smaller nearby district, but the district or the high school actually partnered with a nonprofit, and their goal was to get to 100% graduation. And they literally knocked on doors of kids that were disengaging or dropped out to pull them back in, whether it's online or whatever. We probably have different resources. Is that a possibility, or is that something we've ever talked about, or is it even possible?
Anything's possible. I think we have to set those kind of goals. I mean, 100%, that's setting the bar high. But I mean, when we look at the context of AZ Merit and everything else we're discussing, I think we can do that. And it is a matter of trying to reach out and touch those disengaged students. That is what will turn the dropout rate around. We have students within our, well, I want to be careful with that. There's dropouts, and there's kind of the cognitive disengaged, and somehow when do they tip to becoming the dropout? I don't know, but our teachers do a fabulous job of reaching out to those students, and we need to just continue that.
Okay, thank you, and thanks for the great
I'd
work.
love to see your stuff from Tucson, by the way, and just what that was.
I'll go find it.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Kirby. Thank you for the presentation and the data. I think what I would like to see, and maybe it's a work study conversation, is after the principals and leadership has had some time to really, what I call, peel the layers of the onion back on this data, for you guys to come back to us and say, okay, here were the ahas that we found in the data. And maybe it is looking across sites and we have this big aha, and maybe it's looking across fifth graders and we have another aha. Because this is good data, but it's not really knowledge yet. It's not true information. One
and then I'm kind of like Board Member Perleberg, I'm not being critical, I'm just, I'm concerned. One concern I have about the push to increase participation in our honors and AP courses is that we might push too many kids who really aren't ready. And then could that dilute the quality of our honors and AP classrooms? One way we could take a look at it right now, you mentioned that we began that open access to honors and AP 4 years ago. Well, can we go look at what was our pass rate of AP courses, 4 years ago compared to where we are now? Did we dilute the pass rate with that push? And then I also noted the focus on all of the next steps. There is a heavy focus on the high schools, and I really even hate to say this word, but I'm going to say it anyway. It is notable in our community that in our high schools we have natural differentiation with our honors classes and with our AP classes, and I'm wondering if that might not be an opportunity for us in our elementary classes. We can do it programmatically through the FLY program and the STEM program, but is there another way to do it on a more pervasive, where it can touch all elementary schools? Because quite frankly, what we see in our enrollment data is that our enrollment's pretty steady, if not growing, I think is what I saw here on our high schools, but it's where our elementary schools, that in recent years at least, we've been really losing ground. So we've got to do something quickly to recapture that, and the site improvement plans are a perfect way to start. But I hope when the principals bring back what their needs are, what they want, we can, as leadership team, attach a price tag to that. And then it will be up to those of us sitting up here to figure out how do we go fund that, so that they can start to achieve those goals and work against and develop against those site improvement plans.
Madam President, Board Member Kirby, you're exactly right. The elementary principals, when talking about who they want to be when they grow up, was Dave, if we put it there, where we have support, and the answer is we better.
Well, and I would just
figure a way to prioritize.
Thank you for sharing that question that they asked with us, because I don't know as a board member what is that support, how much is it, and so that's where you guys over here have to go put the pencil to the paper and say, okay, to get this really up and running like they want to do it at XYZ Elementary School is going to be an annual financial investment of X, and those dollars will go to these areas. And then the way I would envision is we as a board and a leadership team, we have to look at and start prioritizing and just start chipping it off, a little bit at a time, because if we don't have a list, we're not going to make any progress against something that we don't know exists.
I agree.
And Madam President and Board Member Kirby, I appreciate the request to have us look at our data from 4 years ago, the baselines, and where we're at now. I did want to clarify that we did that in response to a request from the Office of Civil Rights, who had done an investigation and said we need to take a hard look at what barriers we have in place for kiddos to get into honors level or AP coursework. And so I'm really proud of the work that our sites, principals, teachers, departments have done, but I appreciate the request to look at that data, and I'm anticipating it's going to tell a pretty good story, but I'd love to do that in a work study where we could come back and have that conversation.
Mrs. Hartman, your light is still on. Is that? No, okay. Mrs. Perleberg, yours?
Yes, I'm going to jump right in, follow up that conversation, because when I heard Board Member Kirby talk about those, the questions of pushing honors APs classes, all I'm going to do is throw in anecdotally what I've heard as a parent. And I preface saying this, but that is exactly what is it, anecdotes and just a perception that over the last couple of years, I had a senior graduate last year, I have heard parents, especially, like in the Swirl complex, and a lot of these parents that I've heard these comments from actually live in the Coronado complex. So I'm going to just generalize and make assumptions, which is really bad, but in those two complexes especially, I heard anecdotally concerns about, I have a bright student. They went into honors, maybe I'm not going to say they were pushed or shoved or anything like that, but they were encouraged to go into honors. They were encouraged to go into APs. They struggled. They're bright students, but they got a C or they got a B, or they really struggled to get a B, that type of thing. And when they graduated, their parents are literally saying, why on earth did I push them into those classes, because now their GPA is this, and I'm trying to get scholarships because we can't afford to go to college otherwise. So I'm just, and I mean, even as I hear myself saying this, I don't want it out there as, oh, I'm against honors and APs classes. I just think if we don't start getting a little thoughtful about that dialogue that is out there and trying to understand how big it is or what it really means, I just would like to shine that light on it, as well as we look at the data. So I'll put that out there.
No, and I appreciate that. I think on 2 points. One of the pieces of data that I share with all 5 high school principals is a breakdown by AP course in terms of the number of tests taken. Essentially, what it shows is the percentage of your students enrolled that tested, and the percentage of those students that passed that AP class. In fact, the last several years, I've put out recognition letters for our teachers. This year, I chose to actually recognize all of our teachers, our AP teachers, for the fine work, because our enrollments are going up across all of them. So that's a piece of data that I monitor, and frankly, we've been pretty consistent with the last 3 to 4 years in terms of that percentage of kids taking the test, which is in the high 70s, and the percentage of students then that pass, which has been in the high 60s across the district. Now, it varies a little by school, but it's been relatively consistent, even in this environment that Dr. Benson talked about of open access. The other piece, too, I can relate to what you're saying regarding I don't want to say we push our students. I would hope that these are options, and they're well-thought options, but I know in talking to my own children and friends, they look at peers who took absolutely no honors. They have the 4.0, and in fact will receive scholarship and such. And those that took honors and maybe ended up with the 3.8, but were more challenged, do not. They maybe didn't even fall into the top 10%. But I would hold to the notion that that student that took that honors in AP is probably better prepared. And it would be the longitudinal piece, which of those kids will actually finish that 4-year degree. That's a little harder to find out, but that's a tough rub for parents. I get it.
And very fair statement as well. I agree. It's a tough balance there. It really is, but thank you.
I want to add that tension is significant, GPAs versus how we best prepare our kiddos for schools. I've heard parents talk about that as well, too, but the intent of encouraging our kids to participate in this level of coursework is to allow them to be most successful in their next steps, regardless of GPA. So I appreciate you sharing the parent perspective. The other thing I want to do before we get too far gone here this evening is make sure we are pausing and thanking our teachers, because as we have encouraged and extended more invitations and open access to our kiddos and remove barriers, I have seen great things happen with teachers who raise the bar for all kids and make a difference for kids that maybe wouldn't have had that opportunity before. I've heard teachers talk about, I'm not sure, can I get them all there? And they do get them all there. And so I just want to make sure that we're acknowledging the hard work and efforts of our teachers in this conversation, who are doing great things right by kids every day in this context.
Mr. Jackson.
I just want to say quickly, I certainly understand that Board Member Perleberg's concerns are, and Board Member Kirby's, but I've got to believe the upside for getting kids to push themselves into taking these classes. There will be some kids that get in there that aren't over their head, but there's going to be lots of kids also that would never have thought of doing that rise to the challenge, and I think it's well worth the. We've beaten this to death. It's a fine line we're trying to bridge here, but I got to believe encouraging these kids to push themselves more often than not is going to be better for our kids to do that. And it's something that I think is a goal we need to continue to put a lot of effort into, just like you're doing, to get these kids to try these AP and honors classes, because more often than not, I think they'll rise to the occasion, or they'll certainly come out better prepared. So thank you.
Dr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. And I think to follow on what Dr. Benson said, we've got two of our finest AP teachers sitting right there in the audience. And I think we need to recognize and thank them because they do incredible work with our students. And it's interesting, they'll sit next to each other because one's math and one's English, but they, you know, they both do great work. And I think they would tell you, if you ask them, that kids that come to them that want to be successful, they're going to help them be successful, and they're going to work and work. And I know Josh and Chris both put in countless hours to give that extra instruction and those types of things. So kids realize, they walk out of there going, wow, I can do it. And I think that's the most successful thing you have, is when it's not the grade, it's them knowing that they can do it when they had doubts when they walked in. So I just want to say thank you to you guys, because you guys do a great job there. And to follow up with what Mrs. Kirby had talked about in our investments and things, I can tell you that I have a list. I can tell you I'm working on it, continuing refining it. As I've talked to a lot of the teachers, if I talked to administrators, there's been a few things that have bubbled up. Obviously, we hear salary, but more importantly, I heard from folks lower class size, and then I started hearing about what are some of the additional targeted type of programs that we can do, whether you want to call them, you know, for lack of a better term, innovation, achievement, any of those types of things, because we have a wide range of students. So I have that list. I'm working on it, going to continue to refine it. We have a principals meeting on Thursday, and I'm going to challenge them with some additional items at that principals meeting. And I think we will get pretty good to come with a menu to the governing board, so that when these dollars are here, we're going to be able to say, these are truly the items and these are our priorities, because I think collectively the leadership needs to say, all right, here's what we're hearing from folks. We also got to prioritize it. And that may not be an easy discussion and decisions to make, because sometimes it may be a program over some other increase. So we have to look at that.
I just had a couple comments. I don't want to keep us here any longer than necessary, but I remember when it was a board focus to increase the AP participation. And one of the things that I looked at in the data, I mean, this data is just really rich. It'll be interesting to see how our professionals interpret it and take it to the next level for action. But what I noticed is that even though high school enrollment is down, participation in AP and participation in testing are both up. So kudos to our professionals for accomplishing that. There were people at that time that thought that couldn't be done, and we've proven that it can be done. So I should say our dedicated teachers have proven that it can be done. I'm also interested in seeing that Arizona trend, especially as more and more schools have had to align with the standards. I know we did it a little bit earlier than some of the other districts, but when I'm talking about trends, I'm looking at graduation rates. I would anticipate that as our material has become more difficult, and as we aligned our material with college readiness, that we would have more students as the years go by prepared for the AP courses at the appropriate level. And I would think that would probably be a consistent trend across Arizona, because we know that the material is more difficult than it used to be. And luckily we can focus on a lot of different things at once. But my big thing is that the students who have the desire and the drive and the ability get every opportunity they possibly can. And if that means that once in a while we have to have a lower class size if we can fit that into our budget, the actual student and the impact that could have on them is what's most important to me for success. And so I want to thank you for this. This is fascinating, and I'm not normally a real data person, but I just was fascinated by it, and I can't wait to hear how our professionals interpret it. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And Board Member Perleberg loves honors and AP's classes. I just wanted to be very clear. I just love also to be a devil's advocate, so thank you.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is, thank you for clarifying that, is future items. Board members may propose topics for future consideration. Mrs. Kirby.
Two questions, two topics. The first one is the list that Dr. Peterson, the investment list, does that fit into one of these topics that's already on our agenda somewhere? The prioritization?
I think I'd rather have it added as a separate line item, so we
Okay.
highlight it.
Okay, so that would be my first request. You know, well, okay, I can't talk about it now, but sooner than later, so that I can talk about it. And then the second request is, I think it was over email. I had expressed that some questions and requested a discussion around this. Is this on, this is the Ed Center project conceptual plan. Is that on our discussion anywhere?
I think we will have that, I need to get it on here, I think for the October 8th study session, we will have it on there.
Okay, so it's not already embedded in one of these existing items, it's a separate.
I had a note for it, I just need to see how it was listed on here, but October 8th.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Hartman.
Just two follow-up items, and if they're already on the list, that's fine, but two outcomes from tonight would be an update at some point on the assessment, testing, and technology readiness for, I think we talked about 13 schools that still need the technology, and then there was a comment around our specials. And then secondly, a follow-up point on the disaster recovery capital budget requirements that go along with potentially the ARF and the additional cybersecurity investments.
Mrs. Perleberg.
I kind of hate to say this because I know we have a pretty crammed list of agenda items, but at the East Valley School Board Consortium that we attended, discussion had come up about CTE programs across our state and funding for those things. And I had to reflect on the fact that I'm a board member woefully ill-informed about our CTE programs here in SUSD, and I'd just like to put up the possibility of all of us learning a lot more about where we are and what challenges that program does indeed face, and try and have a discussion about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have dates of upcoming meetings. Thursday, September 17th, 4 p.m. We have a study session. Another study session Thursday, October 8th at noon. A regular governing board meeting. The next one is Tuesday, October 20th at 5 o'clock. It'll be in this boardroom. And just to round out the evening, the next item on the agenda is governing board reports. And let's mix it up and start with Mr. Jackson, please.
I know it's getting late, so I'll be brief. I had the privilege of going to, with several board members and Dr. Peterson, several people, to a Coronado community breakfast on September 1st. We're in this room, actually, and it was an incredibly wonderful event to highlight Coronado High School and engage the local community to get them more involved with Coronado High School. This was, my understanding, was something Alyssa Tarkington has been wanting to do for a while, and this was the year when she realized that dream, and it was just a hugely successful event. And just real quickly, there were several people that worked hard to pull it together. Dana Close, Rod Pritchard, former board member Denny Brown, and
City Councilwoman Virginia Cordy all threw in their support behind this. And anyway, it was a wonderful event for Coronado High School, and it was great being there.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Hartman. Or, I'm sorry, Mrs. Perleberg, did you have, you don't have a light on? Miss Miss Hartman?
Thank you. It's really been a great month since our last board meeting. The areas I just wanted to highlight in terms of my focus areas are community outreach, community partnerships, and then board development and governance. So from a community outreach perspective, the Coronado Breakfast attended the Coronado Breakfast, and it was a great experience. I agree 100% with Board Member Jackson's comments, and Principal Tarkington and the Coronado students did an excellent job in hosting it and showing our community in its best light. Also attended the SUSD Foundation, which was an outstanding event, and really, once again, reached to our community in, I think, a deeper way in our alumni groups. And then also attended with a couple of us the East Valley Governing Board Consortium, which is great in terms of really seeing our districts collaborate together and talk about really important topics like Arizona Cut Scores, communications, state and land trust proposal. From a community partnership perspective, which is really about creating and improving strong district relationships and partnerships, spent time with our Business United for Scottsdale Schools and the SUSD Foundation, along with Board Member Jackson, and really trying to establish what strong relationships look like and how we can work together more closely in aligning those communities. Spent some time with Cisco organization and continuing to work with actually their national and their state leaders on what relationships could look like within our district and what kind of offerings that they can bring forward, which we're talking about some things with Coronado High School, as well as our Dr. Forless at Create, and really exploring what that partnership potentially could look like for us in our district. And then from just a board development and governance perspective, always just to improve, to be better from a governance perspective. It was great to attend the ASBA Law Conference, which focused on board governance best practices, district employment law, and other legislative updates, so all hot topics for us. And so those are just some of the things over the past month. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I also attended the East Valley School Board Consortium. It was nice to see other board members there, and the Coronado High School Breakfast. The ASBA Law Conference, which it's no secret, is always my favorite. The materials that are available there are just amazing. And if any of our board members want to go onto the ASBA site, and if there's anything that looks like it would have been interesting to you, I got permission today to share with you the presentations. So just let me know. I'll get them to you. Well, I represented the SUSD Governing Board at the ASBA Delegate Assembly. The slate was accepted just as it was almost unanimously accepted, just as it was previously presented, other than a little bit of wordsmithing that was done, as it always is. And the SUSD Foundation Quest for the Best Gala is always a highlight of the year. I also served on PPAC this month and was elected as vice chair for the next year. So coming up, I just wanted to let board members know that ASBA has a webinar series for board members and superintendents called Leadership Matters. It's a series of 4 webinars that you can sign up for. You can watch them in the comfort of your home. And Sandra has the invitation if you missed it. 3 of the 4 of the webinars actually occur between 4 and 5 o'clock, just before our board meetings. But they assured me when I called today that the links will be available to anybody who signs up. and will be sent to you by email. So if you want to look at the presentations after the fact, you can do that. And ASBA will have their Maricopa County meeting, which is always a good chance to meet fellow countywide board members. And they will be voting on a new Maricopa County co-director to serve a 2-year term. So that, I think Sandra also sent out the invitation. It will be on Monday, October 19th, and I won't be able to make it this year, but I hope some other board members might make it. And with that, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, everyone.